Generally, you said feminism is neutral.
Here's what actually happened.
The foundation of all knowledge.
I'm really mad that
this is how men
what
end
difference
up
does it make,
in
right? What
positions.
Stop.
The deregulation of the industry is obviously going to cause more of that industry.
And to lubricate the trust connection between people until they have enough.
Yet we could still look at biological reality in determining who's a female, even if there are.
Why don't you denounce feminism the same way you're denouncing capitalism? If you don't...
For something to be objective, it needs to be verifiable. And you can't verify...
If I make a claim as a political pundit, it is true that I definitely could be wrong.
Yeah,
you're promoting, right?
Ideology is the main benefit of politics, right? This is my ideology.
So 2015, anyone go back and watch the footage? The first GOP debate.
Cool, Robert. Oh, they're dead? For a while, you said.
And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. I am Sara, the Raging Tomato, bringing to you another live debate. I'm so excited for this one. We are discussing social construct trumps forced doctrine in societies. Vybe here has the affirmative claim on this one and is also dual streaming. So if you'd like to go show love support over there, please feel free to do so. We love sharing is caring. And of course, Azrael is taking the negative on this position. Vybe, if you'd like to begin with your opening statement, please.
Yeah, so I'll concede a minute of my time here just to give a shout out to Sara. And if you guys are watching, to make sure to hit that subscribe button, to hit that like button. Also, make sure you donate and actually become a member of Sara. Azrael, I've been on a couple panels with him. I also want to give a shout out to him. I respect him. I'm looking forward to this debate. I really feel like, he's a voice to be heard and he has something to say. So if you guys know his channel, and by the way, if the mods are on there, throughout his channel on there so people can find him as well and subscribe to him. I think that's really important. I think as creators, we have to absolutely support each other, whether we agree or disagree. So kind of going back into that whole idea of supporting each other. I will say I invited the Crucible crew here for this debate because I'm curious what they're going to say in chat, and you guys, go at it. But I am actually a fan of Andrew Wilson. And when I first heard forced doctrine, I was like, oh my God, I'm an idiot. How did I not see this? This is genius. This is perfect. Yes, if all men wanted to do this, we could do that. Logic says that 100%. We are the stronger sex. If we wanted to dominate everything, we could. And I respected that. And I thought about that. And then I started thinking about that. And I saw him say other things. If we could cage up all women. And let's be honest, right? I didn't want to make this a hit piece on Andrew, and Andrew's not here. So Azrael is the proxy for Andrew tonight. However, Andrew may come up and say something completely different. I don't know. But when it really comes down to it, the idea is, yes, the logic says if all men want to cage up all the women in the world, that is absolutely a logical truth, right? We can't deny that. But when I started hearing him, I wanted him to say something like, but we don't. And that's what really got me thinking, why don't we do this? If we can, why don't we do this? There's got to be something greater than forced doctrine, than that prevents all men from caging all women. There's got to be something bigger than that. And this does turn into a slippery slope. So the slippery slope is, in most of his debates, he says, well, rights don't exist. You can't touch them. You can't feel them. The only reason they exist is because there is a force behind that. And here I am arguing that actually there's a social construct, which is very similar to a right. But the social construct actually is the ruler over forced doctrine. Forced doctrine is a backup, because most of society, and once again, we can go back to Andrew's debates as well. He thinks shaming is good. And you know what? I think shaming is good as well. I don't walk out my front door naked if I want to, because I'm going to be shamed by the neighborhood. I probably will not be arrested. My neighbors will probably shun me. But there is something bigger than just force. Now, we can go through psychology. We can look at like all of like time, where there are times where men are stronger and they force women to be in certain roles. This is not actually, it is force, but this has always been unstable. We can look all through history. My original thesis being that I have a vibe. My thesis is that I don't think force is necessary, but I think it is necessary for the people that defect. But the majority of people in society do not defect. The majority of people stop at a stoplight just because it's convenient, because they know if they stop at that stoplight, they're not going to get hit by another car. They're not doing it because the police are going to come and like terrorize them, right? So, but we do have societies where we've seen this behavior, and every single time where there is a force of men dictating something that the majority do not want, something that does not fit the force or the social contract, those societies always collapse. The most successful societies that we see today, including the United States, are societies that actually are part of a bigger piece, which is the social construct. Yes, we have defectors. We have people that do not believe in these ideas, but they do defect. And that's when the forced doctrine is necessary and is required to take care of the edge cases, right? So we can basically look at the forced doctrine simply as the emergency brake in a car. Like the social construct is the engine that keeps society running. The emergency brake is the forced doctrine. Now, I do have a sub note here, which I didn't bring up, and it's not part of the debate, but if Azrael wants to actually hit on it, we do have a bit of cultism in the YouTube sphere, in the sense that if somebody that you like when I saw Andrew and I saw that, if you like them, you just follow them insanely, right? You support them. You trash everybody in chat against what they say. But I would say that the real thing is part of this whole thing. It would be sometimes you have to question the people that you respect, and you have to respectfully ask the questions. Is forced doctrine really what forms society, or is society actually built on a social construct which is made up but doesn't need enforcement, but is enforced by how people treat each other, how they relate to each other, how they construct. And when those that do go outside of that, then we bring the force in as a secondary. So the prompt is, does forced doctrine or the social contract trumps the forced doctrine? It totally trumps it. And we can look at philosophers, right? We can look at the philosophers like Rousseau, Kant, Knowles, Carl Smith, Nietzsche, Marx, all these guys, right? They all have things in there. And a lot of their phrases on the forced doctrine, where this came from, are basically dictated by a very simple concept: legitimate force doctrine. So where does the legitimacy come from? Well, the legitimacy is, when does a social construct actually say that forced doctrine is now allowed? Forced doctrine is not allowed. We cannot cage up all women. I'll wrap it up. I know I'm like 30 seconds away. If you guys noted at the beginning, I called out Sara. I promoted Sara. I called out Azrael. I promoted Azrael. I didn't do this because either one of them threatened to send goons to my house. They didn't put any force on top of me to make that call out in the beginning. I did it because the social construct says that if I lift and support the people around me, they will lift and support me as well. And therefore, there was no force doctrine included in that. And it was just nature and normal human behavior.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Vybe. And Azrael, to you, please.
All right. I guess I'll start by saying thank you for Sara for hosting the debate, asking me to come to the debate, and thank you for Vybe for accepting when I accepted. Definitely go follow Vybe, and you can't follow me yet. I might get my YouTube channel running soon, but not yet. But into my introduction, I went a little bit more formal. Imagine a city in flames, streets filled with crowds refusing to disperse, the air thick with tear gas and chants. Riots erupt, and suddenly the world stops and pays attention. Why? Because riots highlight that action makes bigger show than simply having a social contract. Because what happens when social contracts fail us? While polite marching and strongly worded letters fade into the background, dumped by the noise of daily life. Disruptive action forces society to confront uncomfortable truths and demands response. Today, we're going to argue in a world where power vacuums are quickly filled, whether or not it's a cultural agreement or a fear of repercussions that keep the status quo. Let us first examine the very foundation of society. Society only works as long as people believe in it, or if they are forced to compel or obey. This is not cynicism, it is historical reality. We like to speak of social contracts, a beautiful ideal where free citizens consent to governance through voting and mutual agreement. But for the vast majority of history, most people didn't have the right to vote. There was no social contract as we understand it today. Instead, humanity was ruled by the force of those above us. Pharaohs, kings, emperors, and feudal lords, who maintained order not through ballots, but through spears, taxes, and through the threat of violence. The peace of empires was often peace of the grave or the chain. When beliefs in legitimacy of rulers crumble, it was not polite debate that followed, but rebellion or brutal suppression. The truth echoes into our modern age. The faith in institution erodes through corruption, injustice, and incompetent societies does not greatly dissolve. It's held together by compulsion or it fractures. The ancient philosopher Plato warned, the price good men pay for indifference to public affairs is to be ruled by evil men. Plato understood what many forget today. Public affairs are not optional hobbies for the politically inclined, but a means to control the force that governs us all. They are the lifeblood of societies. When good men and women withdraw into private life, focusing solely on family, career, and personal virtue, they surrender an area of power and opens up for far less just men to seize power and use it for their own means. Evil men, ambitious, ruthless, and unburdened by conscience, eagerly step forward. They seize the levers of government, the media, the institutions, and ultimately force to enact any change, bending them towards their ends. Power in the hands of evil man enables grave atrocities. Powerlessness in the hands of good man ensures their irrelevance. History screams this lesson. From the atrocities of tyrannical regimes to the quiet erosions of liberty and complacent democracies, we see a pattern echo through history. Evil, empowered with a force, can commit genocides, suppress dissent, and pervert justice on a mass scale. Meanwhile, good people refuse to engage out of fear, fatigue, or misguided sense of morality or moral purity, become spectators to their own subjugation. Their virtues remain private, their voice irrelevant, and their principles powerless against the machinery of state or mob. My opponent may argue that our modern democratic systems, with their elections and constitutions, have solved this problem. The social contract is now robust and self-sustaining through the ballot box. But this is a dangerous illusion. Voting is a mechanism, not a guarantee. It requires an informed, engaged populace that believes in the system's fairness. When large segments of societies feel the contract has been broken, they see the laws applied unequally, elites insulated from consequences, and voices systematically silenced, belief evaporates. And as we establish, the belief fades, force re-enters the equation. This is why accountable force matters. Peace through social contract has its place, but history shows that sometimes stronger signals are needed to shatter indifference. Riots and disruptive actions, while chaotic and often costly, serve a vivid demonstration of the government will no longer, while the governed will no longer silently consent. They make the abstract failures of governance concede and urgent. The force those in power to calculate the cost, continued injustice. Good people must be willing to wield to power by force and take visible standards, whether it is voting booth, it's through the public square, it's through the courtrooms, or when all else fails, in more direct confrontation, because the alternative is irrelevance and subjugation.
Perfect. Thank you so much,
I'll see the rest of
Azrael.
my time.
That's good. All right. And ladies and gentlemen, as you know, we will get through the debate. Then we will move into closing statements. We will read and respond to your kind super chats. And then, of course, your favorite part of the show, we will move into open panel. So if you have something to say or add into this debate, fear not, we have room for you up here with the panel. All right, gentlemen, I leave the floor open to you.
Yeah, so I would have a question to Azrael, right? He opened with riots happen. People riot. And my first question would be, why would the people riot?
People riot because they find discontent in their government, and they utilize this method to come into the mainstream to highlight matters of importance.
And typically, are they rioting when the forced doctrine is actually going against them?
I mean, if we look at the BLM riots, then absolutely. It depends on what the riot's about. A lot of times people are just upset with the government. Sometimes people are upset with events. But yes, it can be the fact that they're rioting because the force that's being used against them isn't what they want. And if we were to look at like the Boston Tea Party, they rioted against the 2% tax. It's all about the individuals at the time and what they're willing to fight for. We're at like a 39% tax today, and all it takes is one good riot, one good Tea Party, and maybe we could overturn it. But everyone's become complacent nowadays. So,
well, I mean, you had mentioned that I am conflating this to modern day society. However, if in your opening you said like today, Vybe thinks this. But if we actually look through history, and as you just said, the Tea Party, right? Every single time we've seen forced doctrine used to the extreme, where literally like caging up women, the social contract wins. People rise up, they riot. So you're basically saying, yeah, okay, rights don't exist, social contract doesn't exist, all because it's all based on whoever's got the most amount of force. But what we've seen over and over and over in history, it's not just today, is that the social contract actually always wins.
So social contracts will hold things together. However, force is what implements and allows it to continue. Wouldn't you agree that without force, social contracts are completely null void and cannot be enforced?
Absolutely not. Actually, I have lots of studies on this. I have like half a dozen or 2 dozen studies on this, that when you remove the force, yes, there is an increase in people that disobey the rules, but the majority still actually obey the rules. It's like when you go up to a stoplight at 3 a.m. in the morning, most of us stop. And yes, I am guilty. Every once in a while, I look around. I'm like, all right, there's nobody around. I'm going to run this red light. But we don't make that decision because we're fearful. We just go, yeah, this is logical. And during the day, when we actually stop at the light, we stop because we know it's a benefit for us. We know that we're not going to get hit by another car. We're not stopping at that stoplight because some police agent or the military has a gun to our head.
Well, here in Houston, I don't know how it is where you're from. People absolutely run the red lights as if there's no one around, especially in the middle of the night. I would say if we had the force of cameras, so you can no longer have cameras in intersections, at least in Texas, to monitor people who run red lights. There actually has to be an officer there because I don't know, the law just changed. I haven't really looked into that, but I didn't realize you're going to bring up red lights, or else I'd have looked it up before the debate. But if there was a camera still at every red light, I would say that red lights are going to get ran a lot less because there's that incentive. If you get caught on that camera, the force of the officers giving you a ticket, of course, that's not an immediate force, but eventually you don't pay those tickets, you're going to go to jail. It all does come down to force eventually. If you don't pay the ticket, you're going to go to jail. So yeah, there's the immediate incentive of not paying, which isn't technically force, but the end all be all is a force of you getting arrested and sent to jail.
Okay, well then, I mean, if let's define force, right? Force doctrine, as Andrew Wilson puts it, and I did not mean to make this an Andrew Wilson hit piece, and it really isn't. However, when I researched this, I found that he's pretty much the promoter of force doctrine. It's a rebranding of might equals right. It's a rebranding, but not even anywhere close to Plato's Republic. So we've got this. So we're on force doctrine. So force doctrine basically says that I can, as men, as the strongest hive of the two sexes, I can make anybody in the world do whatever I want as men. Like if we all concede together and go, you know what, I want to cage up all women, we can do that. Would you not disagree with that?
No, I'd completely agree with that. The only even reputable like time in history that I can think of where women actually held any kind of force was in a tribe in Africa where about 40% of their military were females, and they wielded long swords. They're actually the primary individuals who enslaved the Africans around there in the area, the ones that were shipped all across the
and they were probably backed by men, right?
But no, they actually weren't. That is actually a pretty weird topic. It starts with a D. I can't pronounce it. It's a separate language. But at the end of the day, that they were still the minority of the military, and it was primarily men, 60%. And you said that we can't cage them, or we don't cage, not that we can't, but that we don't cage them up. Do you believe that there actually is nowhere in America right now where women are subject to men's scrutinies, and they're not even allowed to leave their house without a male escort?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So, I mean, this is something I have to concede to. Is that yes, men 100%, and I'm not fighting this. I actually say it trumps, isn't real. So I do believe that force doctrine is a necessary component to society. However, I think the social construct trumps the force doctrine, that as the majority, we actually behave pretty well with, and this would come into terming, like how do we want to term this? Because you mentioned, well, financial damage is force. Would shaming be force? Would humiliation be force?
Financial damage is not force. But at the end of the day, if you don't pay that fee, it does come down to force. So the end means is force. If you don't pay the fee, you're gonna be jailed, and you're gonna be arrested, and you're gonna be subject.
Right, but I think we can both agree that is not a part of force doctrine. The force doctrine that we're talking about is that men are stronger. Men can do whatever they want.
As long as men aren't stopping them. Yes, men hold a monopoly on force. Men are the proprietors of force. Women are, by and large, on average, a lot weaker than men, and then they have to appeal to men for their rights.
And because men are stronger, why haven't we just why haven't we caged up all the women and just made them sex dolls and just have fun with them?
We have.
Okay,
not
so
in
any scenario that we've seen this happening, we see the social construct or the social contract actually the whole world saying you're wrong, don't do that. We see people jumping in there. We see without force. So they have the force, they're winning with the force, and we see the social construct coming in there going, no, this is wrong. We may be invading Iran because of nuclear missiles, but no, you know what? We also hate that they're abusing their women, right? The social contract keeps on winning over and over, even though we could just comply and just go, you know what? As a man, it's much easier that I don't have to deal with my wife. If I could just have one in a cage, make sure she cleaned, cooked, and did all that stuff. But no, that's not how it works. There is something dominating over that. And all the philosophers, by the way, I mean, I listed them out in my opening, all actually talk about force being real. It is a real construct. It is something that's needed, but they all put some word in there. Even Marx put in a word in there, legitimate force. So the question really is, what is legitimate, and where does that word legitimate come from? And that comes from the social construct.
Well, legitimate or not, force will always prevail. We can look at Attila the Hun, who terrorized all of Asia. It doesn't matter whether or not he was evil or not. He terrorized Asia, and he did it effectively for a really long time.
For a period.
And even then, you got a lot of Muslim-ran societies where women don't really have rights. Now they did 30 years ago, but they've since lost their rights because men took them away. It's not such a far-fetched idea that men could and maybe eventually will, the way the world's going, take all of women's rights. Not Christian men, obviously, but a lot of even westernized continents are now being overrun by individuals who believe that you can beat your wife if she doesn't agree with you, that her vote is worth half of your vote in financial matters, that they can't go out without full coverings and stuff. You can look at the UK, you can look at Canada right now, who are both being overwhelmed, and even Australia are being overwhelmed. We're next. So it's not to say that social contract has won or is winning. It's to say, will it win? And inevitably, I don't think it will. I don't think social construct is what is going to save us. It's going to be our military might and our force to enforce our laws.
Yeah, see, and this is actually an interesting twist and turn in this whole debate, right? Is what is our social contract right now, and how is it getting distorted? So where I think you're going is saying that the social contract is actually getting distorted. However, I agree with that. The social contract is getting distorted. The majority, whether it's strong or not, whether it's men or not, because today, I mean, if we really look at it, the strongest man, we can take this whole force doctrine. If it is really real, then there's only one man in charge, and that's the strongest man, right? Because he can dominate over all men. So it's just a silly argument. But if we really look at I'll concede to your debate where maybe the social contract is wrong, but at the same time, it's still winning, right? So if the social contract is changing to leftists and you and me as Christian rightists don't believe in it, it's still winning over the force doctrine. Therefore, force doctrine is still secondary and still is, I mean, it's trumping the force.
I feel that's kind of leaning out of the topic at hand, that force doctrine versus social construct. Yeah, yes, we're both Christians. Yes, we both believe, and we're all endowed with the Spirit, the Holy Spirit, and we all have the discernment to know what's right and wrong. And and I would hope that we all do the correct thing, but that would just, at the same time, I have to attack your argument in itself, which is the social contract is what's going to win over forced doctrine, but the social contract can only exist after forced doctrine exists. So without force, all these laws wouldn't really exist. What would you define? Could we define social contract in your terms? That way, it's something that we have out on the table.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And the social contract is different for everybody because it is, this is the weird thing about this debate, right? Like there's this debate that rights actually don't exist. So to say that the social contract trumps forced doctrine is like saying, hey, here's this made up thing. And therefore, like, how does it exist without any force if it's actually above that, right? So now what we can say is, as Christians, you and me as Christians, we can say, well, our social contract is with God. We know that when we go to church, we're not going to enslave the women. We're not going to punch them. We're not going to beat them up. We're not going to do anything like that. That's a social contract we have with God. Now, there's the secularists out there as well. The secularists will say, well, we all had discussions. We think murder is bad, except for when it's abortion. And we think that doing these things are bad. And that's our social contract, right? So we have to both concede in this point that the social contract is different per people, right? But the majority of the people that are following whatever the majority of the people believe the social contract is are going to prevail in the end, whether it's us Christians or whether it's the secularists or whatever. And the ones that decide defect, the state is going to use the forced doctrine to rein them back in, or just say, you know what, you're not agreeing with the majority of society, therefore we're putting you somewhere else.
I just want to pipe in for just a second because the initial claim is social construct, but we've kind of geared into social contract, and I want to make sure we know there's a slight difference between the two, right? Because I think sometimes we accidentally say contract versus construct, but I just want to make sure that we're understanding we've got two.
Yeah, I would say it's the social contract.
Okay.
Well, either way, social construct is just a construct that people all agree on. So from what I got from your definition, is it's what the populace agrees to follow, which also fall under social contract. So for this purposes, they could be used interchangeably anyway. But if we use it for just what everyone agrees on, then that could be anything, and that could be what Iran and Afghanistan, all of them believe to treat their women, how they believe to run their lives. It could be how like small tribes in Papua New Guinea like to how can I say this on YouTube? Like to deface their
how
youth,
long
you know?
do those last, right?
How long they last or not is irrelevant. The point is whether or not
it is pretty relevant, right? I mean, we can look at all. So if you're using force, like we can look at Italy and World War II, and we can look at definitely that the force won during that period, but it failed. We can look at Rome. We can look at force. It failed. What we see constantly is that when force is used, it fails. And the reason it fails is because of the social contract.
All that really proves is society fails. It doesn't actually allude to any point. It doesn't address my point. This society will fall. America will eventually fall. Russia will fall. China will fall. Japan will fall. Canada will fall. We all will eventually fall. So all you're saying is societies fall. That's all you've proven in saying that.
Okay. So, okay. Prove to me how the social contract does not actually have a authority over force doctrine.
So social contract or constructs do not have authority over force doctrine because two individuals will not have the same construct or contract. And when those come into conflict, who's going to win out? Because as we've defined it, it's just what the people agree on. Well, when two large groups of people agree on different things, like during the Civil War, when two halves of America disagreed, it came down to force. It came down to a war, a fight for our rights and for us to give individuals rights who rightfully deserve them. It wasn't a contract that freed the slaves. It was a war, and it will always be a war. It will always be a fight. You have to fight for anything that you want. You're not entitled to it. We don't actually have entitlements.
And what promoted that? Was it just because men were like, yeah, I want men, I want blacks to be free? Or was it because the social contract said, this is not right?
Well, individuals appealed to large groups of individuals for their individual.
Because there's a lot of people out there that had force that probably could have like fought for that.
Yeah, I agree. But different groups of people appealed to different groups of people for their beliefs. And at the end of the day, it was the two people fighting for that beliefs. The North preached that the true word in the Bible, obviously they were more informed, that the true word, that all men are created equal, that you shouldn't take chattel slavery. It says in the Bible that you should. That was their real argument, because the argument for it was slavery is condoned in the Bible as well. But the more enlightened people, the more read people, the people who actually follow the true word, were the individuals who were saying that we can't enslave these people because you're not allowed to steal a man into slavery. I'm not good at memorizing particular scripture, but it does say in the Bible that you can't steal a man into slavery. It's an abomination. But the other side was saying that it's condoned in the Bible that you are allowed to do it. But that's not a social contract or a social construct. That's more of you just appealing, and you appealing to what? Appealing to force. It's just you appealing to the force, and then once you appeal to it, that's where it comes in. Social contract would more be how we ought to behave. And I do agree with you that most people behave accordingly, because that's just what most people want to do. They like to be liked, they like to fit in. We're pack animals. But that's not the driving force. What's gonna keep things in order? The driving force is force. It's always going to come down to force, because without force, you have no means to enact your rules, to enact your laws.
So basically, what I'm arguing is that the majority, I would say like 80%, and from the statistics I'm looking at, this is a pretty accurate number. 80% of people in the world, or in the United States, let's just use the United States, actually have no problem with the laws. They don't need enforcement. They will behave. They want to take care of their families. They want to farm. They want to drive to work. They want to do whatever they want. 20% of the people, and also looking at the statistics, may go on the fringe. And this is where we bring force in, right? And you're saying that those 80% could not ever actually do that. Like, they're actually living under the fear. They're in fear of being forced out of the forced doctrine is, if you don't behave, you're going to be punished. You're saying that 80% of these people that just live their lives, are very happy, are only doing it because there's a force behind it.
Yeah, for sure. So even more so than that. So if we actually look at the statistic of individuals who have criminal records, it's about 1 in 3 adults actually have some sort of criminal record, meaning they've come into some sort of altercation with the law, they've been arrested, or they've been cited for a crime. Even more so, the individuals, the 2 out of 3 individuals, follow those laws, so they're not cited for a crime. I don't.
Yeah, but one of 3 is a lot. And by the way, a criminal offense, if you're looking at those statistics, is actually a parking ticket. So not 1 in 3 people are actually freaking breaking the law. They just might have not came back and put the quarter in the freaking machine.
Yeah, but that's breaking the law. I mean, you can argue that it's not, but it is. In any way, we have laws.
Is the enforcement, like, was he like running to his car, or is he like, okay, you know what, I'll just fight this, or I'll pay the ticket. That's fine. I forgot to put the quarter in. That's not a law-abiding citizen.
There
That
you
is
go.
not a
Just
criminal.
Just like you said, they're not going to fight it. They're just going to pay it. Because if they fight it, that's force, and they don't want to deal with the force. It's force that keeps us enacted within our laws. You just
Well, it didn't
basically-
there. He failed.
Yeah, he failed, and then he got a fine, and then he got it back in line. He paid that fine. He didn't refuse to pay the fine. He didn't just continue without paying the fine. And individuals do all the time. People don't pay fines, and then they get their license revoked. They get extra fines, and they get arrested, and they either have to pay those fines eventually, or they're going to sit in jail. It's always force that ends the day.
Well, no, I mean, nobody's going to sit in jail for not paying a parking ticket. But
if you don't pay the fines, yeah, you actually will. If you can.
No, you won't. You'll get a bench warrant, and if you get pulled over, they'll be like, "Oh, you got a bench warrant. You're going to go to jail." But no, the cops are not going to come to your house and take you to jail because you didn't pay a ticket.
And then you'll go to jail.
No, if you get a bench warrant, they're not going to come to your house and like pick you up. They're only going to bring you to jail if you have a bench warrant, if you get pulled over for something else. Mm-hmm. And by the way, this is kind of a ridiculous statement in the sense that, once again, this is not a non-abiding citizen, right? They're not. They didn't not pay that to be disingenuous to the government. They're not trying to force anything. They just happen to be living in a society that they agree with, by the way, saying, yeah, you know what? I always pay my things. I fucked up this time. I'm going to pay the ticket, or I'm going to fight it in court and just say, you know what? I put it in 10 minutes later. It doesn't matter. But the force there actually isn't there for that particular person. The force has nothing to do with them not paying or paying that ticket.
So let me just
there's no force in that.
Let me just still man your argument. You're saying there's no force involved in whether or not individuals pay their ticket.
No, the reason they didn't actually pay their parking thing wasn't because of force.
So why would they just not pay it then? If we take force out of the equation, if we take
my point is somebody made a mistake, and they didn't make a mistake out of there was no force in their minds. They were not trying to abide or disabide based on force. They just made a mistake, right?
Yeah.
Now,
they made a mistake.
Granted, they can choose to pay or not pay the ticket, and that's them rebelling. And once again, there's not much force there either. And where do we want to define force as well, right? I mean, I brought this up like 20 minutes ago. If you want to say I look at force doctrine as the way Andrew puts it, is that if all men in a hive mind want to cage up all women, we can do that. My real question is, why don't we, right? It doesn't come down to a parking ticket or not. Why do people not actually do that? Why do men not do that if we are so capable to do that?
I mean, we live in a lot in society, and like I've stated, we do in parts of the world, and we have in the past.
And how's that looking for the rest of the world?
I understand we live pretty gracefully in America, where everyone mostly has a pretty good moral conscience, and everyone tries to do the right thing. Most people try to do the right thing, but at the end of the day, if we were to cut force out, if we were to just would you agree that force would be our police system in America, right?
Hey,
social contract would be the judicial
You said
system.
If we were to cut force out, I think crime would rise 100%. I mean, I can pretty much guarantee that, right?
Yeah.
That my point isn't that the force isn't necessary. I agree that the force is necessary. However, my real point is that most of us, 80% of us, and tons of documentation, I'll post it in the back chat too, that says when we remove all restrictions on human behavior, 80% of us still actually follow what's good for each other. And force doctrine is the backstop. It's the 20% that don't behave, and we need it, because if we let that 20%, they will be the force doctrine dominating us, right? So we have to have that regulation in place. to prevent those from disrupting society and the social contract.
Yeah, but you say that we don't lock women up. Yes, by and large, we don't lock women up. But there are cases in America where men do actually cage women and do actually abuse women in horrific ways. And
that's the 20%. That's why we need force doctrine.
Yeah, but
it's not the primary.
If the other 80%,
most men don't do that.
Yeah, I agree. But if the other 80% didn't use force, if it didn't come down to those men protecting those individuals from the minority, that minority would actually, even 20% of men would be able to overrule the majority of women and enforce their will upon them.
Let me just put my point there. When I say it trumps, I don't mean that we should get rid of it. I think it's a very necessary factor. I think it absolutely needs to exist. We do need to protect when those 20% are being harmed. And the justice for that is the social contract, the justified usage of the force. So when I say justified usage of the force, that means force is necessary, but there has to be a justice in front of it first. And that justice is the social contract.
So you're saying justice comes ahead of force?
Yeah.
So we would agree, I believe, that the enforcement arm would be our police systems, our SWAT systems, our ICE systems, all of those individuals, the majority men, some women who are in there. However,
we absolutely need them.
System would be the judicial system, the legislators, the law writers, right, the individuals who write the law. Now, the issue comes in with, there's individuals who write laws, and those laws get put into action, and the force, the police, SWAT, and ICE enforce those rules. However, if by and large they just decided not to enforce those rules, then the judicial system has absolutely no power. Yeah, we have a quote unquote social contract, but just like I said in my opening, what happens when all of that erodes? What happens when we no longer want to follow that? What happens when we have the riots, like for
then things change.
BLM riots, things change, exactly. So yeah, we have a social contract, but that's not what wins the day. At the end of the day, what wins the day is force. Because yes, while we live under the social contract now, the second a large group of males decide we don't live under that anymore, and that number is large enough and has the appropriate individuals inside of it, we no longer have that agreement.
See, this is where I think you're going wrong, right? I have a neighbor. He's kind of annoying because every time he trims my bougainvillea that's going over his fence, he drops it in my front yard. Really annoys me. But I love my neighbor, and he's actually a good guy, and he's actually pretty good at fixing things at our house. This is a social contract, right? It's the sense that, like, okay, yeah, it is my bougainvillea. It's going over to your yard. I'll put it in my waste bin. I have to pay for that. But I didn't ask you to cut it, but it is going in your yard, blah, 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 right? There is no force doctrine in this scenario. This is neighbors being neighbors. Now, what you're talking about is something like, you're saying, well, there are bad men, there are bad people out there, therefore we need force. That is something I concede, I agree with, right? But when it really comes down to it, like neighbor to neighbor, I think we're actually pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, generally in America, most people just want to be kind, but that doesn't alleviate the need for force. It doesn't alleviate the need for.
Okay, so where does, when we are using force, come from?
It doesn't alleviate the need for a body of individoes to enforce the rules that we place. Without the enforcement,
I agree
rules
with
don't
that.
matter.
But where does that idea come from? Of when we use force or when we don't use force, right? So I'm talking about my neighbor. And you're saying, yeah, that's good. I think most of us want to be kind. When do I decide to not be kind? And when do I decide to use force? And where did that come from? Where did that idea that I am now going to use force come from? Is it just because I'm a man, I'm stronger? Or did it come from that I actually have a stronger moral objective, something that I'm looking at that's bigger than me being stronger?
So yeah, I agree with you. You're being kind, you're helping out your neighbor, you're not starting confrontation in the same way that I don't start confrontation with my neighbors. I have neighbors out front of my house or out front of my apartment. I live right in front of the elevator who sit there in front of the elevator and wait for it to make a ton of noise. I go out there and I'm like, hey man, people are sleeping here. Could you be quiet? I don't just go out there and start beating them up. However, let's say you're a different individual. Do you know who Wes Watson is?
Mhm.
You know who Wes Watson is. The guy who threatened to beat up Andrew Wilson.
Yeah.
Let's say he's the neighbor and he's like, hey man, stop putting stuff in my yard. I'm gonna beat you up next time you do that. That's where force comes in. And yeah, he could do that. He has the right, or he has the ability. Of course, he could go over there and beat the dude up. But at the end of the day, force is still gonna win because the police are gonna get called. He's gonna get arrested and he's gonna go to jail like he already is. He went back to jail because force wins at the end of the day. Yes, you can have your
almost there. We're almost there, though. You just basically laid out a scenario where you said this is a justified use of force. And by the way, I've never argued that force is not justified.
I don't think you should beat up your neighbor because he dropped some branches. But I'm saying he would think it's justified and do it.
Right. And there's something that equates when that force is used. And my idea here on the social contract is that, and it can be different. It can be different for every country, and it can vary for every country. However, when force is used outside of the local contract, it fails. When it's used in the local contract, it wins, but it's always run by the social contract. It is run by the people of that country of when it's used, and it is never the primary reason it's used. It's always the backup for that 20% that decide they don't agree with the rest of society.
Yeah, until it's not. So you're saying
until it's not when.
I'm getting at that. I got an example.
Okay.
So you're saying within the group of individuals, that's all only contract that wins over. But if we look at Iran right now, we'll say that Iran has a social contract within their nation. However, when they locked up the Straits of Hormuz and they started enriching uranium, that's where it becomes an issue for Israel and America. And we've been bombing the shit out of them on all of those nuclear sites where they've been rich in uranium. So we utilize force, even though in their culture, even though their little group of people believe it's okay to do that. We can still utilize force against them, even Iran, with the help of Iran, both of us together, to stop them from doing their social contract. So whenever a larger force wants to interfere with your social contract or whatever social construct you have going on, you're losing it. You don't actually have that social contract. Social contracts only exist in the absence of or in the presence and with the presence of force. So you need the presence of force to enforce your social contract, and you need the absence of opposing forces to prevent you from to not prevent you from enacting your social contract. So at the end of the day, you need the force of your community, but also the lack of force from other communities to stop you.
Okay, so they've got a social contract, and they've got, and by the way, they have a much more sexist view than we do, right?
Yeah.
We don't like that, and we're in there. We're using our force. Once again, we're using it based on we just don't like Iranians, or we're more powerful men, or do we believe that our social contract is more powerful than theirs? Therefore, we can use our force against them, right? And this is where I argue this whole thing. It's very easy, right? The social contract on us of the United States is saying, and it's mixed reviews in the United States, whether this is justified or not, but this is not based on, yes, we're all men in the United States with really powerful armies. We can bomb the crap out of you. It's based on, we believe that our construct is better than your construct, right? Our ideology of this is better than yours, but that is actually what's running the force. The force isn't just because we're men and we want to bomb the fuck out of Iran. The force is because we believe we have an ideology bigger than that. And once again, force is secondary. We maybe we have the power, maybe we have the diligence to do that, but at the same time, it came from an ideology that existed before the force.
So you said at the beginning of that statement that our social contract is more powerful than Iran's social contract. I want you to, if you could for me, define how a social contract can be more powerful than another social contract without utilizing the fact that we have more force in result of said social contract, because then you're still just appealing to force.
Yeah, no, that's really good and a really good point, right? Because you're basically saying that, hey, we have two social contracts, and because one is more powerful than the other, then therefore force actually is the primary. But that it really isn't the point. The point is, what is running force doctrine? The force doctrine is the contracts that are being run. So the United States, yes, maybe we have more power. And once again, I've conceded to this over and over and over again. It is a necessary thing that exists, but it is not the thing that drives our behavior.
Yeah, driving factor or not. So yes, force doctrine is a mechanism that can be used in any possible way. But the whole point of the argument and the whole point of the force doctrine debate is to say that force doctrine itself is the more important than your social contract, than your beliefs, because at the end of the day,
no. So
wait,
what runs it?
So at the end of the day, it's not might makes right, it's just might makes. So what runs it is the individuals who hold the force or utilize the force. We can take the 19th Amendment, for example. When we ratified the 19th Amendment and gave women the right to vote, they appealed to a majority base and a much stronger base. They appealed for their rights. I mean, yes, there's some nuance to it. It was a non-government organization ran thing, and most women didn't even want the right to vote. But at the end of the day, when the vote was ratified, it was a majority women, the majority of women who wanted it, and they did get it. And they appealed to what? They appealed to the force of men. In the same way, we could take it back too. Like, I know some people say it as a joke.
We could take it back, but why don't we?
A lot of us actually believe that but I'm getting to that. A lot of us actually believe we do need to repeal the 19th. It would do the world a lot of good. Women primarily lean left, and a lot of men are getting on the boat. A lot of us are saying that we need to repeal the 19th because women today aren't having as many kids. They don't really see the need for a family. There's a study that came out, and a lot of studies that's came out recently, where they question men or women what's more important to being successful. And most of the time, women put pretty irrelevant things like having a successful job and stuff like that, where men are putting very high on their list having a family, having kids. And that's important to us. That doesn't mean it's not innately important to women. Women view things like they need to take care of it because that's their mechanism to take care of kids. It's their driving force for that. And when they don't have kids to take care of, they have to latch on to something. They have to latch on to some kind of minority group, some kind of defenseless creature. And right now they're voting Democrat because Democrat plays on their emotion to tell them, hey, this person needs your help. Pablo needs your help because he came across the border. He killed 3 people, but we're going to forget about that. He's an illegal immigrant. He deserves rights just like you. So they're appealing to these women's emotions. So if enough of us get tired of that, and we do decide that we need to repeal the 19th, men can do that, and that's the force. So even within your social construct, yes, technically your social contract, your social construct is the control measure of what drives the force, but the force itself is what gives control, is what gives legitimacy. Because if you can have all the good social contract you want, but if you don't have the driving force of the force, you're screwed. Like in my opening statement, I said, let's see, power in the hands of evil men enables grave atrocities. Powerless in the hands of good men ensures their irrelevance. It's still power that ends the day.
Yeah. So, I mean, ultimately, I mean, you're kind of agreeing with me here. So the social contract is kind of what drives what we decide is legitimate force or not. I am conceding force is necessary. I do believe it exists. I am saying it trumps it. And what we have actually seen in history, and by like thousands and thousands of years of this, we've seen that there have been there have been multiple occasions where the majority or the force didn't have the majority of what people believe the social contract should be. And every time we've seen that happen, it fails. It ends up in riots. It ends up in catastrophes. The society collapses. You did that in your opening statement too. You said societies collapse. They collapse when the social contract does not align with the force doctrine being used against that society. Now, you said, okay, every society is going to collapse someday. That's a theory. Maybe you're right. Maybe you're wrong. I don't know. But ultimately, what we see is stable societies are ones where the social contract is always running the force doctrine.
Okay, let's take. Do you know much about Sparta and how their political system worked?
No. Educate me.
One in 7 individuals were actually Spartans. The other 6 were actually slaves. So the slaves actually had the majority. So therefore, they had a larger social contract. However, the Spartans themselves had to go through trials from the time they were like infants all the way until adulthood. Most of them ended up dying because of that. But because of those trials, they became so powerful as individuals and in combat that they could influence their will. There's actually the children of Spartans. So as children, Spartans they get up in these crews, and their job is to infiltrate or spy on the large group of slaves, because it's 6 in 1. And what they'll do is they'll look for anyone who's strong or like a leader type, and their job and their right to their right to become true Spartans depends on them killing strong, powerful individuals within these slave communities to make them less powerful. And communities they had social contracts amongst them. However, they were ruled by a minority of individuals who held monopoly on force because they were stronger. It doesn't matter their culture. They had less people. They might have even got lost against them. I mean, they never did. That's not how they fell. But I mean, it's possible they could have won. So
I mean, if that is such a successful case of force doctrine, then why are we not repeating that today in today's society? I mean, wouldn't you think like some billionaire would be like, well, that was brilliant. Why aren't we doing it today? Well, why are we not doing it today? Because it doesn't work.
I mean, it worked pretty good for a long time. I'm pretty sure the Spartan civilization
not that long.
It lived a lot longer than the United States, man. The United States is still in its infancy. We can look at Rome, who ran on force.
We're hitting 250. What this 4th of July?
We can run on Rome. I mean, how long did the Spartan Empire even last?
But this is all hypothesis, right? Like, I mean, that failed. It failed. We know it failed. We might fail, but I can't predict whether we're going to fail or not, right? We might. But what you're talking about did fail.
The Spartans almost lasted for 1,000 years, bro. We're not even close.
Yeah, but they still failed.
But that's a fallacy in itself. Well, what about?
How's that a fallacy?
Because we're still in our infancy. We haven't come to our end. We will fail too. We don't know how long.
That's fine. Last. We might fail too, right? You might be correct on that. I'll concede on that. However, there's a lot of smart people out there and businesses love to replicate success, right? And there's a lot of smart businessmen out there. Why are they not replicating the Spartans?
I mean, because
it doesn't
we won't
work.
need it.
That's why.
I mean, we won't need it. Eventually, like police officers, SWAT, and construction workers are all going to get replaced by robots. And honestly, when that happens, we're fucked, bro. The robot.
All right, that's the next debate. We're going on that one next. But
the businessmen will actually have a monopoly on force, and we will be subject to their rule. We'll be subject to their laws. We subject to them in every way because we'll have no monopoly on force. It's inevitable, really. So that's why when you say
okay,
so we're doing good so far, we're only like 200 and something years old, man. Like
I'll give you a little credit on that because I actually was going to say that force doctrine also isn't based on the strongest man anymore. Like if we were to like take women and men and say, okay, they're two different hives. There's women, they're men. Yes, men can dominate women. Now let's look at the men that can dominate men. And how do we break those groups up? Right now, it is tech, associations, and corporations. The strongest man in the gym is not necessarily the strongest man in the world.
Yeah, but they still rely on military. I was in the Marine Corps for 5 years. They relied on my ability and my fellow Marines' ability and willingness.
Yeah, I get that.
Follow their orders.
I can see that.
I mean, because I hear the argument too that technology is this great equalizer, but men have to maintain that. Yes, it's going to come a smaller and smaller group of men as technology advances, but even right now, like women are not as good in combat roles because they have higher hygiene standards. They have lower physical ability. Their hip structure is built in such a way that they can't carry large packs and loads for extended periods of time without being injured long term. They're just physically weaker, and even so, they can't hike. They can't get to the location that they need to fight. I mean,
yeah, but this
it's
is
a lot more complex.
Whether women are stronger or weaker, and I'm going to concede to you 100% on that as well. Right? I used to be a coach for junior Olympic girls, and as soon as they hit like 14, their hips change, their body motions change. Yeah, there are biological differences. We just know that. Like, there's no defending that men and women are different physically, but when it comes to men, right? This is where we're crossing a barrier in the sense where you're like, well, we still need strong men to build the weak men's engineering plans for the better weapons. But there is a point, like you said, if there's robots, and I've heard Andrew make this debate too, right? If a girl has a gun, that's an equalizer. No, men are better at shooting. We're just better at shooting. Yeah. But there is a point. Now, I just want to go men versus men, weak men versus strong men, right? How do we actually start defending this? And the weapons that we've created. Einstein. Do you think Einstein was an alpha male when he went out to the dance club? But he fucking built the nuclear bomb, right? Right? Like that's a pretty badass motherfucker. So, like, but is he not an alpha? Like, when we go men versus men, would you say that, like, hey, I'm going to put Andrew Tate against Einstein? Who's going to win?
Got whipped recently, but
we know. but until Einstein drops a fucking nuclear missile on him,
I get your point. But at the end of the day, that's still men maintaining things. Yeah, a strong mind is also a part of it, but that's still just force. It's the force of a bomb.
Yeah, it's just a greater
force.
You're 100% right.
So at the end of the day,
it still comes down. There's a driving force behind our force that trumps the force. There's a mind for you and me. Our mind is God and Christ that trumps physical force. For secularists, there is something in their minds that says this is right or wrong that trumps physical force.
So to me right now, basically, I mean, this could be a straw man. I feel like it's a still man. All you're saying is somebody has to commit that force. Somebody has to be the force, and their ideas is what's going to lead it. But I mean, that
no, I don't think
that's baked in. That's baked into my claim anyway. What would be my claim anyway?
Most of us don't need the force. Most of us good Christians, just actually abide by God. We don't need the police. We don't need a military. We don't need anything to be good to our neighbors. There is no force required. There are edge cases that exist in society where we need force. Yes, force is 100% needed for the edge cases. However, I do not think force is what runs society. I think our basic good nature, I think my relationship with God is my good nature. I think secularists' agreement on coming together on something is their good nature. And I think we use force for those that do not agree with the social contract, which, by the way, is something that can be different from country to country and people to people. But the social contract actually dominates over when we use force.
Yeah, but that's to say that everyone's agreeing. I live in Houston where there's a lot of violence. There's a lot of gangs.
We don't always agree.
That's what I'm saying. They don't always agree. It was probably only a couple months ago. I was driving down the freeway and I accidentally cut somebody off, and they followed me all the way down the road. I was going to my mom's house, but they kept following me, and then I stopped at a stop sign, and they jumped, and multiple of them jumped out of their vehicle and started to run towards my vehicle, and I just drove off normally. And they ran back into their vehicle, and then they continued to follow me. And I'm like, all right, well, I'm not going to bring this to my mom's house, obviously. I pulled down a dead-end road, and I jumped out of my truck, and I pulled my gun out, and they stopped. Do you know why they stopped? It wasn't because of a social construct. It wasn't because they wanted to talk. They thought my points were articulate, and they thought I ruled the day. It was because I had a gun, and I was going to shoot them. So at the end of the day, force wins. When you're alone by yourself, when you're up against an individual, and even when collective groups of individuals conflict with each other, it's force that's going to save you. It's not some kind of social contract or contract, because that's individual basis and reliant on two individuals agreeing. But my point is what happens when two individuals don't agree? Because at the end of the day, all you're saying is whoever holds the force is the one who gets to make the decision. And
okay, granted, right? When two individuals do not agree, there's a social contract there. And if the social contract does not align, then enforcement is needed. Now, whether that enforcement is you pulling a gun out, right, like in the Wild West, or that enforcement is calling the cops or whatever it is, but there is still. Well, hey, I have a gun like 1 foot from me, right? So I'm a gun fan too.
It's less.
But, I mean, I'm just saying, like
literally right here.
It's very easy, right?
I don't know when somebody's gonna bust through that door. I live in a bad part of town, man. So for me, force is all you got. It takes so long.
But see, here's the thing. Force is not all you got. That's my point here. Is like I said, I have a gun 1 foot from me right now that I can pull out, just like you. So you and we're in the same boat. Have I ever pulled that gun out, and have I ever need to use it? No, not yet. Hope I never do.
I have.
There's a good social contract going on that actually makes sure that actually, like, it's not the law. My neighbor is not over there with Uzis going, I wish I could attack my neighbor, but the law says I can't do it. Like,
but my
he's
neighbor
not
is.
like gunning for me, right?
But my neighbor is.
The contract basically says, you know what? I live next door. I have some chickens. I feed my kids. I'm happy. My neighbor doesn't bother me that much except for his bougainvillea. Therefore, I'm not going to go assault him, right? The contract is proceeding. The force doctrine is the backup. My gun, that's 1 foot from me right now, is the backup. So I don't disagree with you that, hey, should I protect myself? Like, I'm not like some leftist going, yeah, I'm just going to like high five you and make sure we all like make peace. No, I'm prepared for the worst case scenario. But I'm saying that I don't actually have to worry about the worst case scenario because of the contract that we already have.
Yeah, like I said, the social contract works until it don't. Yeah, your neighbors are good, man. I'm really happy that you have kind neighbors. But my neighbors are a lot different, bro. Like, it was literally 3 weeks ago. There was a dude walking around with a knife threatening to stab everyone. The cops got called. He got arrested. He went to jail. 2 months ago, I was walking down the stairs. Another guy had a knife, was just walking around with it just like this. And I'm like, are you good, bro? He's like, you good, bro? I was like, you good, bro? He's like, I'm good, bro. I was like, all right, bro. So at the end of the day, it's force. You got to defend yourself. And without force, you're going to be subject to somebody else's scrutiny, somebody else's rules, somebody else's laws, somebody else's
now
power.
you're talking a little bit about attitude and how you present yourself in your neighborhood, right? Because you feel like there is a lack of force, right?
Yeah,
You feel like there's a lack of force in your neighborhood. Therefore, you feel a lot more
There's
threatened.
too many individuals with force, not a good collective group of individuals.
Would you say that's the norm
regulating
for most of the United States? Am I just in a bubble?
Metropolitan areas, yes. So if you live in a city in a metropolitan area, absolutely. Irina Zarutsky got stabbed on a train, man. That's not a one-off. The only reason that made the news so big is because it was recorded. That happens all the time in Houston and Dallas, and probably less.
Yeah,
in Austin,
and do you think
but-
that's what the majority of people, when they leave their house in the morning, are out to do? Or do you think the majority of people just want to do what they want to do?
I mean, that's just you can appeal to the majority, but I mean, it doesn't.
That's my point. Is the majority is the social contract, right? And the majority actually want to do good. We need force doctrine. I just want to repeat this. It is an absolute necessity. We have to have it, right? Because there are edge cases where, and actually, when I say edge cases, 20% is not much of is not an edge. That's a lot of people. But the majority of people, actually 80% of people, don't need any force. And I ask, and I repeat this question over and over, why do 80% of the population actually not need force to participate in society? Because there's something bigger.
I don't feel that that's an accurate representation of the individuals who do need force. If we're to look at the Wild West, there was so many gun deaths, there were so many murders because we couldn't actually solve anything. So just because an individual isn't committing crime doesn't mean it's not because of their fear of force. We can look at it like this. We have a lot of forensic science and a lot of ways to catch people. So even if they think they can get away with it, they know they can't. And science isn't even that advanced as people think it is, but most people are afraid to do crimes because they know they won't get away with it. But you can't really track that stat.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of, so I did do a lot of research on the proof on this, right? One of the really easy ones that everybody knows about is taxes. There is actually no enforcement. Yes, you could get audited, but 87% of people in the United States actually fill out their taxes without any enforcement at all. I have 12 other studies here that have done like college studies where they're being watched and they're not being watched, whether they profit off of this. And the number comes out to basically 80% of people follow the social construct, whether being watched or not. When they're being watched, it goes up to like 95%. When they're not being watched, it drops to like 80%. So we still know that 20% of people, when they go, if they say, hey, we're doing this experiment, here's some money, nobody's going to watch you, we don't want you to take it, but take it. 20% of the people will take it. 80% of the people won't. Right? That's the social contract right there. Most people actually want to be good without any enforcement.
I mean, that to say people just want to be good is not actually true.
I'm not saying I think people want to be good. The studies show that people actually are good.
As long as they
this
think
is not a crazy statement of me. Like
as long as
I have so many studies here.
I think majority of people just go with the flow because it's easy. If we look at the Milgram experiment, where they had individuals, they had an authority figure ask people to shock somebody to
yeah, I know this one. Yeah,
to varying in intensity.
They follow, right?
And they follow. So yeah.
Okay, so let me ask you this:
authority figure asks somebody to do something
if a person is so inclined that they will do a random experiment
in the Stanford
and listen
experiment
to that person, do you think that person actually needs physical force, or do you think they're just following? Right? That is not that is a person that falls in my category where they're. And I agree with you in the sense that that's pretty shameful that that person would hurt somebody just because somebody else tells them. But that experiment shows that that person didn't need force. They just followed the social contract.
Not really.
Shameful for them.
We can also look at the Stanford experiment. Well, individuals, one was given power and the other one was given subjugation. So one group of individuals were set to be police officers, one individuals were set to be convicts. They got more and more intense with their punishments to almost torturous degree. So individuals,
and once again, this shows how much stronger the social contract is.
Some individuals utilize that force, as our society has mostly been doing in a good way. But to say that a social contract is what's driving it, it is in itself, and I guess you could call it an accurate statement. But that's just to say again that individual with force can enact their will. But at the end of the day, you still have to look at it as it is the force itself. And it doesn't matter the contract or the individuals who have the contract, because as soon as your contract's null void, as soon as someone whose contract does not agree with yours has more force, they win. And yeah, you can say that because it was their contract that made them win, but it doesn't really allude to the actual point, in my opinion. You're just basically saying that people with force can do that.
I really like what you brought up there, right? And I'm really familiar with that experiment, right? These people willingly did it like lemmings, right? They just followed the guidelines. They followed the social contract. At no point, in any point in that experiment, did anybody put a gun to their head and say, here's the force. If you don't shock them, I will shoot you. What actually happened was there was no gun. They just said, I'm the authority. This is the social contract. I don't need to use any force. Shock them. And they still did. And this totally proves my point. I'm not saying social contract is the best solution, but I am saying it trumps physical force every single time. Physical force is always used in a base of some sort of made up subjective justification. And most of us don't even need that justification in the first place. We'll just follow, even if our following is idiotic.
I don't get what your point is at this point.
I broke your brain. I broke your brain.
You didn't break my brain, because to me, all you're saying is that we have social contracts, and within those social contracts, you can utilize force, but it's that social contract that controls the force. But
no, yeah, let's break it back down to the simplest, right? Here's the crux of the debate. There is force, and that exists. I agree with that. You agree with that. I think that the social construct or social contract actually determines that force. I think all force is based on the social contract first.
Can you lay that out for me?
Force is not.
What do you mean it's based? Do you think that individuals with a better social contract have a superior force? Can you lay that out? Or can you say that individuals with a worse social contract can actually have superior force?
No, I mean, the idea is originally, like I said in my opening statement, if all men can cage all women, why don't we?
But we do. I've already stated we do, and just not in America.
Yeah, but and everywhere we do that, we see it fail and eventually fail. That's actually
well, everything. That's just to say everything eventually fails. The law of entropy says that things are eventually going to digress, to expand outward, and energy is going to be lost in the same way that everything's going to be lost. Everything's eventually going to end.
Wherever we see that, right? Child trafficking, the social contract says we have to stop that. All these countries go, okay, we're going to try to do this with finances. We're going to send churches there, or the government comes in and says, you know what, we got to stop this state from doing that. They fail because the social contract is the dominant force that is supplied to the force doctrine. The force doctrine is not the primary prescription. The force doctrine is to say when the social contract, whether we agree with it or not, that is the primary of that country, that world, whatever, has a justified mean for actually enforcing that, right? So once again, like the beginning of this topic, the social contract trumps force doctrine because we are not men. And by the way, I mean, if I was a secularist guy, on OnlyFans, it'd be great to cage up all the women. Like, why don't we make this decision just to cage up all the women, hive mind, give the most beautiful women to the strongest men, the sub ones to the sub men, and the ugliest ones to the ugliest men. But we all have partners, right? Like, why wouldn't we just do that? Because we don't, right? Because we have something called a conscience. There's something bigger than forced doctrine, and it doesn't actually dictate that. Even though we could take all rights from women, we still don't.
So you said social contract trumps forced doctrine.
Yeah.
Okay, just making sure you're going to stand on that, right? Social contract trumps forced doctrine.
Yes.
How would social contract trump forced doctrine? Let's say you and 5 of your boys are sitting at a bar and you got a good social contract between you. Let's say your social contract's better than the other group. Let's say the other group is just a group of individuals who don't really even know each other very well, but there's 20 of them, so they have more force than you. How is your simple social contract going to beat the force of 20 people?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of stupid. I could say, one, if that were to happen at a bar with 5 of my kids and the 20 beat us up, the social contract of the people in that bar would probably come to our defense, because the social contract is going to overwhelm the idiocy of those 20 guys that want to beat up 5 kids.
There's only 25
right?
of you in the bar.
What's that?
There's only 25 of you in the bar. You 5 and those 20. There is no one to help you.
Well,
Your
then they'll
social
show up in the
contract
news,
doesn't mean anything.
and those guys are going to be shamed. They're going to be very shamed. They're going to walk out of there. We're going to go to the hospital. They're going to be shamed. We'll have put up a good fight. Probably put down like 4 of them. They're going to be on the news. They're going to be shamed. They're going to be publicly humiliated. They're not going to be able to walk into any other place again without being shamed, right? And that's part of the social
That's
contract.
all irrelevant. Doesn't contend with my argument. My point is,
no, actually it does, because in the end we win, they lose.
No, not if they do it good enough, and you don't wake up the next day.
Okay, yeah, if they kill us, right? Now you're taking it to extremes, though. But this is what I was trying to say before. Like, I can take all my clothes off right now and walk outside. I don't think the cops.
We don't need another
me.
nip slip. Calm down.
Right.
I don't know if you're here for that one.
No, I have one neighbor that goes to my church, so that neighbor is probably gonna look at me and be like, "Why is my
congregation on you,
church guy here like walking out there naked?" My other neighbor on the other side, they're secularists, and they're gonna be like, "Is this guy trying to like show his penis to my daughter?" Right? They're all gonna have these different thoughts. Now, I have no actual desire to do that.
But you know what else would
but
happen?
I'm not going to do it because I don't want to be shamed by my church, and I don't want to be shamed. I don't want to be shamed by my Christian neighbor, and I don't want to be shamed by my secular neighbor either.
You could also
I just don't go out there and do that.
Indecent exposure, which would be force. If anyone,
but that's what I'm saying. Is if I were to go out there and do that, if I had that desire to do that, I stop doing that because I don't want to be shamed by my Christian neighbor, and I don't want to be shamed by my secularist neighbor. Right? It's not force. It has nothing to do with force, because force would be them calling the cops on me and them coming and tackling me and handcuffing me. I don't do it not because the police are going to come and tackle me. I don't do it because I don't want to be shamed by my neighbors, my church, and whether they're secular or religious or secularist. Right? I have a personal morality that stops me from doing that, and the majority of us have that morality. Not all of us. The majority.
You can't know that the majority of people have morality. At this point, you're just claiming to be a mind reader because
No. Actually, I can claim that because I've got tons of studies. I'm looking at 12 studies right now that actually say people behave this way.
Yeah, I'd have to look over them. I wish you would have linked all those before the debate. That way I could have looked over them and at least debunked a couple of them. Okay, you have studies, but those studies don't read people's minds. People lie, people write things, and people fill things out to meet consensus and to not sound crazy. But at the end of the day, what's going on in people's minds and what comes out of people's mouths are two totally separate things. I mean, you're religious. We can look at what Jesus said to the Pharisees, that outwardly they look good, but inwardly they're rotten, they're filthy, they're pigs, they're scoundrels. So yeah, people say one thing but do another. And yeah, you say that force doctrine isn't the end all be all, that social constructs are actually what drives the force doctrine. And I've already succeeded the fact that social contracts can be a control arm to the driving force, which is force doctrine. However, even without social contracts, force doctrine wins the day. Even if individuals without a concise social contract can still band together and then win a war. If we look at the Crusades, for example, how it was multiple sects of Christianity, how the Orthodox and how Catholics, and there was a couple more that all band together. Yeah, they didn't really have per se a social contract with each other, but they did agree to fight with each other and run the Crusades and did a very good job. They took great odds in war, and even furthermore, the social contract within the Spartan community. Again, how those individuals were vastly outnumbered. The slaves vastly outnumbered the actual Spartans, yet the Spartans themselves, who have a smaller social contract and a smaller group of people, actually overruled the larger group of people. So at the end of the day, it is the force, it is the amount of force that you can enact that is going to win, regardless of the social contract. You can go with your social contract and your superior technology into remote tribes in Amazon and Africa and still lose because of force, because they have more people, because they overwhelm you. So yeah, I have to agree with the fact that social contracts do use the mechanism of force doctrine, but it doesn't say that the social contract overrules the force doctrine. However, because force doctrine is what inevitably enforces the rules that the social contract comes out with. If you were to have only social contract or only force doctrine, and those two were to collide with each other, force doctrine wins. And so your statement of saying force doctrine, your exact statement of social contract trumps force doctrine, is just factually wrong, in my opinion, at least.
Yeah, and you brought up the Bible there before, and I mean, I think both of you and I can concede that the Bible actually condones killing, correct?
It condones killing, yeah, not murder, but killing.
Well, killing and murder is kind of the same thing, right?
No, it's not.
Okay,
They're
so
defined.
would you make the distinction between those two as being justified?
So killing can be justified. Murder cannot be justified.
Okay.
I will define them to
yes.
make this easy. Murder is
That's
an
good.
unjustified killing of an individual, while killing is just killing.
Okay, I'll agree with that. And would a justified murder, or sorry, killing,
Justified killing.
based on when the Bible says this is justified, that would be force, right?
Yeah, I mean, we can look at
and what is the social contract or contract of that? It would be the Bible. So the Bible says when it's justified. You just laid it out. You laid it out as
it wasn't the
one's
Bible
justified, one's not.
Because there was no Bible during the times of let me think. What's one of the places that got overran by Christians? There's a bunch of them. The Amalekites. We can look at the Amalekites, and that wasn't a social contract. It was an order given by God. So that's completely different.
Okay, so wait.
God
Are
told
you
them to
saying
eradicate the Amalekites.
that your and I's believing of God is not a contract with Him? And that our justifications on when we actually decide to use force and not use force has nothing to do with Him?
I mean, again, you need to define social contract where I can answer that question, because I don't think
my social contract. I said this way beginning, like an hour ago. My social contract, when you originally asked me this, is between me and God, right, and my Christianity. Now, I also admitted that there's other people with other social contracts, like the secularists, and they come to agreements. I came up with all these different ways that people come up with their own, right? Mine is Christ, right? Yours is Christ.
So we'd agree in a
that
contract.
that is the primary. And even if I'm Christ based, but I'm super strong and I can kill everybody around me, I don't use my force unless it's justified based on my social contract with God.
So we could agree that a social contract is an agreement between multiple individuals to follow a set of rules, right?
Maybe, right? I mean, for you and me, you and I don't have to agree on our social contract, right? Because you also admit to being a Christian.
I'm just trying
you
to
and me have a relationship. We decide to follow Christ, right? So our relationship with Him is with Him, not with you and me. It's between Him and I, you and Him. Only.
I'm just trying to get a firm definition, like not this ambiguous definition of social contract.
But that's not ambiguous.
It's fairly ambiguous. So a social contract is where a group of individuals agree
for the
to behave in a certain set of ways. So we don't, in fact, have a social contract with God. We have.
I have a social contract with God. I do. I'm sorry. I do have one.
But God owes you nothing, and God has to give you nothing, though. So you have no contract with Him. You have no agreement with Him. We're slaves to Christ. We're to follow Christ. We can't expect anything of God. He's perfect.
Yeah, but you do understand when you talk about slave of Christ, right? There's two words that both were translated to slave. One of them was an actual slave, like a slave as in you were indentured. The other one is a slave as in, and they both got translated to slave in the English version, as indebted for saving my life, right? Like if you saved my life, I'm indebted to you. So when you say slave, there are two different versions of that. And one is indenturement, basically going, thank you. I'm here for you. I'm here to do your just. I am here to listen to you.
Let me just ask you a basic question. Does God owe you anything?
No, I owe Him everything.
Does God have to behave in any type of way to you other than what He prescribes?
Okay, what's the point of that? I mean, like,
it's because you agreed that a social contract is between two individuals to follow a set of rules. So just by definition, we can't be in a social contract with God. We're just
no.
Followers.
How we not? The whole goal of being a Christian is being in a contract with God. And we fail at it constantly. How are you saying that that's impossible? And I agree, it is impossible.
I mean, we fail, but God never fails.
It's our strive,
the point
right?
is God owes us nothing. So the only point in that is because you brought up and you stated that we're whenever God commanded us to kill the Amalekites and things like that, the Jews at the time, whenever they did that because of a social contract. And it's just to say that's not very analogous.
No, actually, I think it's very relevant, and I think you're like trying to sidestep this, right? So force, which has been used in the Bible, especially in the Torah, like getting out of Egypt and taking over the land of Israel, right? There's a lot of force in there.
Yeah,
and
he put 10 plagues on them. He drowned them in the lake.
This would be force, correct?
But that's absent.
Now was it justified because they were men and they just could, or was it justified because they had a social contract with God? Now, whether they're living up to their contract, like God owes us nothing, but were they not living up to their contract with who they worshipped?
So that's why I'm saying you're having a loosey-goosey definition of social contract.
Okay, yeah, correct me. Where am I missing this? Because I think I'm nailing it.
Because we don't have a social contract with God. You and I could have a social contract in society. We can have a social contract as followers of God, but a social contract is a two-way street. It's where two individuals agree to act a certain way for the betterment of humanity or betterment.
No, I don't think so at all. Like, once again, going back to like walking out my front door naked, I don't have a contract with my next door neighbor. That
you have an agreement though that he's not going to walk out naked.
No, I've never made an agreement with them that I won't do that.
It's an unspoken.
They just
agreement.
trust that I won't do that.
It doesn't
There's
have
no
to be
like I
written.
didn't go to my left and my right neighbors and go, by the way, just so you know, I'm never going to walk out naked. There is no agreement there. The social contract is how you behave based on what you feel is right.
Let's ask this. So you and your neighbors all agree not to walk out naked, correct?
No, we've never done that. I've never had this discussion with them.
Well, there's not an agreement.
We don't.
But none of you walk out naked, right?
Not yet.
Because of the social contract.
I might after this.
It's
debate,
analogous.
we'll see.
I'm going to try to define it for you. It's analogous because of this. We don't have the same agreement with God because it's not a circular agreement. It's not an agreement to Him.
But that's where you keep on going. I don't have a circular agreement with my neighbors either.
God, it's not to God and back to us. It's not a circular agreement. It's just
neither is
straight to
with
God.
my neighbors.
We have an agreement to God to follow His rules. God,
which is what would you call that?
Like we don't judge God, and God judges us. God just
I'm not
judges
judging
us.
God, but what would be that agreement that we're going to follow His rules? What would that be? What would you call that?
It's faith. It's faith through Christ. It's being obedient. It's being a servant to Christ.
Okay,
but He's not.
Sounds a little bit like something we're talking about.
It doesn't. I don't think that's analogous, and I don't.
Okay, yeah, no, I see where you're going. You're saying that the social contract has to be two ways.
Yeah, it's
like the social contract cannot exist unless the other person abides. But what I'm trying to say with my analogy is I don't like my neighbor might walk out of their house naked. I don't know. There is not a mutual contract there. It's just my social contract, right? And part of that is actually upheld by God. And I'm not expecting anything from God. I just know what is right. Now, if I have to use force, I will make sure, based on His words, that it is justified force. But it's not the primary driver. Once again, the primary driver is not force. The first driver, whether you're secularist or Christian, is goodness, right? Trying to do what you think is best for everybody. Even if what you think is best for everybody is wrong, if everybody else thinks that's right, then we're all working together. And when they don't agree with that, then we pull the politics, we pull the police, we pull the military, we do the things that we do. Force doctrine is always secondary to our true human nature.
I mean, yeah. So we have a social contract where we have an agreement to follow an agreed upon set of rules. That's a social contract, right? So we got that in stone.
Sure. And by the way, it's not worldwide. For you and I, we have a social contract with God. No, He does not. He does not owe us anything. The secularists in the United States, by the way, so we're in the United States, like we can break this into like a billion different versions. The majority are going to win, right? Like I hate that we kill babies. But right now in the United States, the social contract is actually saying that that's actually okay. I'm not for that, and I don't want to make this to an abortion conversation. But my point being is the social contract isn't always right, but it is the primary factor that determines when force is going to be used.
Yeah, so to say that like I said, social contracts can use the mechanism of force to meet the ends of their goals. I agree with that. But I think you use a loose definition of social contract that kind of fits whatever you need at the time. And this is just from me to you. I would just say that you need to get a more firm definition of what a social contract is, and kind of stick to it, because like I said, it's two individuals that hold an agreement with each other, whether written, unspoken, or contextual, of a set of rules or laws that they're going to follow. And but if you break that, yes, they use the mechanism of force to enforce that rule. But even absent that social contract, individuals can still utilize force against you. You don't need a social contract to use force. And at the end of the day, whoever has more force is going to rule, with or without a social contract.
Okay, so that very interesting. The whole idea that whoever rules, right? And let's go back to my neighbors. I just like to keep it local because it's simple for me, and I'm a simple mind guy. If I'm strong enough to beat up my neighbor, then I win.
Wait,
right?
Are you strong enough to beat up your neighbor?
Absolutely.
You think you can't? You think you got it?
I think I got it. But
okay,
let's pretend I'm not. Right? I go over there. I try to beat him up.
You are strong
he
enough
wins.
to beat up your neighbor. Let's say you desired to beat up your neighbor.
I desire to beat up my neighbor. Right? This is force. And what am I achieving of that? Well, now, okay, this is where we go to the force doctrine, where it says, well, actually, I can't beat up my neighbor because the police are going to come and they're stronger than me, and they're going to cuff me and put me away, right? Would you agree with that?
I mean, it depends on how good you beat them up and how good you hide the body, but
no, it doesn't matter how. It doesn't matter how strong I am. If I go over there, I can't. Even if I'm stronger, even if I am the more dominant male, I still will fail in that scenario. Because the force doctrine says that we have a stronger force than me, right?
Yeah, as long as the cops get called, I'll just grant it. Let's say the cops get called.
Yeah, okay. If the cops get, the cops are probably going to be called, right? I'm sure the wife's going to be mad, the kids are going to be screaming. So that would be me doing force doctrine, and then force doctrine being done on me, correct?
Sure. Yeah, in that case.
Yeah, right. Now, once again, I keep on asking this question that you keep on evading. Like you're like, yes, I can do that. Yes, I have a gun here. Yes, you have a gun. Yes, I can use force and I can win. Sometimes I'll win, sometimes I'll lose, depending on who's the bigger force. But I keep on saying most people don't do that because they just don't do that. It's not in the nature. Sure, maybe you're in a neighborhood where you have to be a little bit more on arm. Okay, that's like, your neighborhood. I grant that. I grant that.
It's a pin. Most, you know how I know it's a
people
pin?
don't do
the
that.
way it is.
Sorry, what was that?
Most people don't. That's like saying, you know what this is? It's a pin, and you know how I know it's a pin because of the way it is. Yeah, most people in America don't do that nowadays. But that's not to say they didn't in the past, and that's not to allude to any fact that force doctrine doesn't rule the day. You're still not contending with the point that you said social contracts trump force doctrine, but my argument is that they do not trump force doctrine, and we can tell this because whether or not you have a social contract or not, if two opposing forces go against each other, one with a social contract and another without a social contract, the force is still going to be the determining factor on who's going to be subject to the rule.
No, so we've seen in history where the ones that do have the force may win for a while, but there's a much upright, and you did this in your opening statement, is talking about riots, right? People start rioting, there's civil distress, all these things start happening when force is stronger than the social contract. And we've seen this in history. There have been many a times when the force is stronger than the social contract. And every time we see that, we see riots, we see upheavals, we see all these crazy things. The reality is that most of us are good people. Like this whole idea that might equals right is power equals right. If I have the power, then I'm right. My argument is that as a society, we're getting much better at it. We've done bad in the past. We're doing bad today, but we do pretty good at this without any force. And we're pretty good at like negotiating these things. The world is getting better. We still have a lot of fucked up things, but overall, when things are really fucked up, we bring in the force. It's required. I absolutely agree that there is force needed, but it comes down to the justification. And this, when I brought to the Bible and said, is there justified murder and unjustified murder? You agreed with me on that. When is murder justified? Well, there has to be a rule abstract rule
I didn't
behind
agree.
that.
I said there's never unjustified murder. There's never justified murder. There's justified killing. Murder in itself is defined as an unjustified killing.
And if that justified killing is justified, it has to come from something besides force doctrine. It has to come from some sort of contract between, I don't even care if it's God, secularists, or whatever. To have a justification, you have to have something outside of force. Because justification does not exist. Like, force is force. I beat up, I kill, I do whatever I want. That's just force, right? It's the animalistic world. It's nature. It's man eat man, right? Without anything above force, we're uncivilized animals.
Sure,
because
but
there is no justification.
Force doesn't.
There's no justification.
Force doesn't need justification. You can even go to the wild for this. We can do lions.
Wait, so the wild, that's what I just did. That's exactly what I just said. I said in the wild, but we're not freaking lions. Yeah, we're humans.
But let me get to my point, though. So just let me finish. So yeah, you can have lions and gazelles. Yes, the lion eats the gazelle, and the lions have a social contract, and the gazelles have a social contract. But all you're saying is individual social contract can utilize in the same way that they can utilize their force within their social contract. Yes, individuals with social contracts have force, but a social contract is not a prerequisite for force, but it is a prerequisite for a social contract to be able to be a social contract that force is required. So at the end of the day, the force is the driving mechanism behind allowing the social contract. The social contract isn't the mechanism behind allowing the force. The force is just force. The social contract, or which was the original statement, construct, is just that, a construct. It doesn't exist in tangible reality, where force does actually exist in tangible reality.
Let me see if I can break this down really simple, right? So I've always agreed that force is necessary. The stronger person will always win.
Not always.
Animal
Sometimes
Kingdom,
the more skilled person, but yeah.
The skilled, stronger. Like we let's just put skill and strength together, right? The more dominant maybe will always win, and that is the animal world. Now, to break my argument into a really, really super simple idea is that I don't think us as humans are that basic. Yes, I do think some men just beat up men, and some women actually beat up women. I don't care if you're a man or a woman. But overall, I think we actually have something higher than I'm stronger, therefore I win. In our brains, we have a higher capacity for how we do things. And this is why, like, because what you're talking about now is just like, no, I win because anybody that's stronger can win, whether it's justified or not. And what I'm saying, in modern society, whether you and I think it's justified, somebody thought it was justified based on their ideas, had some sort of idea that they thought what they were doing had a moral to it. They didn't just beat them up because they were bigger.
Yeah, but what happens when the social contracts dissolve? When they break?
No. Give me an example. Let's not even talk about when it dissolves. Give me an example of history of men when there wasn't some sort of contract behind it that actually enabled them to do, whether right or wrong, that physical action. There always has been a social contract behind every single war. There was always something bigger than I'm bigger than you that led that war.
I mean, not like really between the Native Americans. The Native Americans themselves and their culture, just a lot of people don't even know this, but they just liked war. They just liked fighting. They thought it made them men. It made them powerful. One of the big problems behind
that sounds like a social contract between them.
Yeah, but again, it's not to say that the social contract trumps force doctrine, because it doesn't and never will. I've conceded and agreed with you multiple times that social contracts and social constructs utilize force doctrine as a mechanism, but
as the emergency brake.
Sure, but you need to contend with, can force doctrine be a mechanism without or absent a social contract, and can social contracts be held and enforced without force?
Oh yeah, no, I mean, I said that in my opening statement. It is an absolute necessity.
Awesome, I win the debate.
No, because it's a necessity as a backup. 80% of the people actually will proceed very well in their lives without any force. 20% will not. They will defect on the rules laid by the social contract. Therefore, we need force doctrine. I said this right up in the very first beginning of the debate. I don't deny it. I don't think it's not necessary. I think it's 100% necessary. I think we use it quite well, quite often. I think the Christians have used it when justified. However, I don't think it's the dominating force, and I think it's the reason why all men in this world do not put women in cages, because we have something bigger in our heads that even though we can put women in cages, we don't. And once again, I'm going to ask you. I've asked this like 5 times. Why don't we do that?
Well,
if we can, why don't we?
We do, just not in America. We do in other countries. There are plenty of other countries who do, who give women no rights. And even then, we can look at
and you see those are collapsing. They're all collapsing.
Are they?
Yeah,
they've been around longer than us.
Yeah, well, change takes time, but the contract's changing.
Have been around longer than us, man. We've been around like 200 years. They've been around for like 2,000 years at least. So yeah,
we can see the same thing in
they've been around a lot longer
right?
than us. That's like, they're gonna collapse soon, very soon. We're just waiting, just 2 more years.
You see it like that is lame. That is so lame. Hey, Sarah.
If you want, we can start wrapping up and move to closing statements. We're kind of at the tail end already, and I thought that was a good pause. In the meantime, I will be dropping the link. If you want to start joining the open panel, I'm going to drop the link into the chat so that anybody who wants to join in can start heading backstage. Otherwise, Azrael, I'll leave the floor to you.
So what we've learned today, ladies and gentlemen, social contracts exist in society. Within those social contracts, you can utilize force. Without force, social contracts cannot exist. But without social contracts, force can exist. We still have never been given the signifier of how and why social contracts trumps force, when force can exist without social contracts, but social contracts cannot exist without force. It is going to continue to rue the day that force is the end means to any goal. You can't do anything without it. It's a tool in itself, but it's a tool primarily wielded by men. And just because we do not cage women in America doesn't mean it doesn't happen. Just because we don't mean we can't. We can look at Germany, where their social contract was all over the place, and they completely decimated entire populations of individuals for the simple reason because they could. There was no real justification behind it. There was no reason with the social contract, simply because they could. Sometimes people just wield force because they can. I'll succeed the rest of my time.
Perfect. Thank you, Azrael. And Vybe, the final word from you, please.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. He says, without the social contract, force can still exist. Yeah, concede. Easy. But the whole point of my conversation has been, even though that can be the case, why is it not the case? We see it over and over. You look at Germany, and once again, obliterated, because the world social contract said these guys were freaking causing horrible things to happen. And yes, force came in, justified force, but the force was justified, or at least I think it was justified, because they were doing atrocious things to people. It's not because we could. We didn't go, oh, look at that. They're killing people. Let's join in the fun and kill some of them. No, we actually had a conscience, and we had something bigger than just going, I am bigger than you, therefore I can kill you. Yes, I agree. You can do that. Germany did that. And then the rest of the world said, you know what? We don't like it. We're going to use our force as a secondary, right? We have an opinion, and we came in with our force. So this whole argument that like we behave as these barbarians, that we're just animals, we're just cheetahs and lions all killing each other in today's society is just ridiculous. Force doctrine is not the primary prescription of everything. It is the backup clause that we use to enforce things. It is not our nature. Our nature is much better than that. We're much smarter than that. And yeah, that's what I got.
Fair enough to both of you. I was kind of pondering throughout what all of you were, or both of you were saying throughout the debate. And it sounds more cyclical to me. Azrael, I know you said that social construct or contract, whichever one, is dependent upon force, but force is not dependent upon the social construct. But I actually would disagree with that, because I can have force all I want. I can be a bull running through a china shop all I want. But at the end of the day, if I take over, let's say I take over another town or something with my army, I still have to establish order and enforce the what is going to happen with those people there, right? And that establishes my hierarchy once by like I have to have that hierarchy established anyways in order to drive that force in. I think they're kind of actually, I think they're both necessary mechanisms for a society to thrive, right? One cannot exist without the other, I think, because you could force anything you want, but it's creating that fear of force that's like builds that social construct. But if I don't establish it and I don't drill it in that, hey, this is how it's going to be and this is what's going to happen, there's nothing to be compliant to. You have to have some type of.
In some ways, you're kind of taking it backwards from the way I think of it, right? So I'm thinking that there's this tribe of people, let's say these nomads traveling in the early days, right? And they get along. And then the sixth tribe member all of a sudden does something wrong. He decides, well, I'm bigger, I'm stronger, I want the food. He hits one of them on the head, and the other five beat the crap out of him, right? That's where like they had this nonverbal social power. Now, what the way you were just saying is like, hey, I have an idea. I'm going to amass a party of army. I'm going to go in and tell these people the way I want to be, and I need to establish this authority. But I'm kind of thinking like the way humanity actually evolved originally was a group of similar-minded people. One went off the rails. They had to use some force. And it was that social contract that they had originally that said, when this one guy went off the rails, that we have to use our force. So that's why I always say it's the contract you have within your society that chooses how you use that force. Never actually said that force doesn't exist, right?
Well, I addressed that with my Spartan argument anyhow, but we can look at Egypt, Persia, Rome, or Sparta, all civilizations that had a large group of individuals that were enslaved or impressed upon by force by a smaller group of people. The social contract, again, is smaller within that small group of people. It's not a vast social contract that's far-reaching like our social contract. It's an elite ruling class that imposes their will. It doesn't come down to social contract. It comes down to force. You can have no social contract and impose your force on somebody. And I say that multiple times, and he just doesn't address it, and it doesn't get contended with. So I'm like, what am I supposed to say from here?
All right, but the law of being a slave is still recognized within that social construct. Like the power is not recognized if there isn't. Well, hold on. Yeah, but a power is not recognized without the person without power to be established as well. So you can't like you can't be powerful if you don't have somebody underneath you that's less than, right? And they're
Yeah,
like the rule
course.
of there's always a guy that's bigger, but it's that hierarchy that's being established within society to understand and recognize there's always going to be a guy with a bigger gun or with bigger muscles or whatever the case may be. But that in and of itself is still an established social construct, knowing that there's always going to be a bigger guy. Right.
That's
That's
why I
still
said
recognized.
it was a loose definition. That's why I said a social contract or construct needs to be defined, and we defined it as an agreement between two individuals. And it's not always an agreement between two individuals to follow a certain set of rules. Sometimes it's an opposed upon set of rules and standards by an authoritarian figure in a regime that they don't want to be a part of. So it's forced that rules today. It's not social contracts.
Well, it's implicitly or explicitly. So it could happen whether I want it to or not, right? But I'm still compliant because of the force, right? But I just threw that in there. I think they're mutually moving together. I that's what I think. Just based on the way you guys were describing everything, it feels like you or. The way it plays out is as if you can't have one without the other, and they are reliant upon another. Because what's the point of having force if there is no social construct that comes with it? But I'll move on to I'll save it for the open panel because I know there's a whole line backstage. They filled up fast. But Tootie Butt comes in with the Big 10, says, "Let's dono, y'all. Yeah, be like Tootie. We love Tootie. She's usually the first in the door and the first to send love. We love her for that." Brick sends in a Big 10, says, "Social contract creates legitimacy. What is excessive force? Your king was sacrificed for the legitimacy of the law. Life for life, eye for an eye, tooth for tooth. Authority belongs to the creator, not men." And I'll leave it to both of you if you'd like to respond.
Would you like to go first? Or would you like for me to go first?
You go first because I'm going to take a quick bio break. I'll be back in like 30 seconds.
Sure.
I mean, yeah, authority is endowed. So for my worldview, of course, authority is endowed to leaders by gods, by our God, not by gods, but by God, the individual. There is no excessive force because whoever wins the war writes the narrative and owns the law. Social contract does not always create a legitimacy. Like I stated, you can be a serf or a ruled upon class of a nobility, and it doesn't make it legitimate. You can be a slave, it doesn't make it legitimate. So there's a lot to agree with and not to agree with in your statement there, Brick.
Okay. And I'll give Vybe a second, and I'll move on to the next one since there's no response required from you guys. James sends in the Big 10. "I shouldn't, but fine. He doesn't like hitting our dono goals. He likes to send money, but just enough under to not make the goal. We love you so much." Sarcastic Saint sends in the Big 2, says, "Sarah can't speak unless a man gives her permission." Fuck you, Saint. Saint also says there should be a fine for being that bald, Azrael. You're welcome to say anything you want in return.
No, I shaved my head. You know, it's not like I only have cancer from the ears up. It's not like my hair fell off. I'm not One Punch Man. I didn't work out so hard. My hair fell off. There's a razor in my bathroom I utilize to shave my hair because I'm a man and all men should shave their heads.
Yeah, it's good luck. 2D sends in the Big 5 gifted Raging Tomato memberships. Congratulations to you, lucky lottery winners. 2D's always handing out the freebies to everyone else. And I'm just going to move to the ones that there's no response needed. Fourth Wiseman in with the Big 10 says, "Gotta go. Have a wonderful evening, folks, and use discernment. See ya." Thank you, Fourth Wiseman. We appreciate you. James comes in with another Big 10, says, "One for the road before I go to bed, or go watch some social contract in action in the movie." I think you meant Mad Max #2, The Road Warrior. Mad Mapper sends in the Big 10, says, "For the panel." Shout out to you, Mad Mappers. Thank you for understanding the rules of this game. James Farley says, "Hi, Sarah. Stay strong." I'm staying strong, my friend. I love you guys so much. All right. And I'll kick it back to you on this one, Vybe, if you wanted to respond to it. Did he freeze?
Either that
Vibe?
or he doesn't have to blink anymore.
At first, I thought he was just reading it. All right. The force got him. The force got him.
That's my
so
force
much.
doctrine. Got him. I win.
Ruh-roh.
Wah, wah.
Ruh-roh. All right. I'll let you, in the meantime, if you want to start responding to these, Azrael. Attila the Hun was Turkish, not Mongolian. Stop parroting false history, Azrael. By the way, Attila the Hun did often reside in Mongolia, and he and band members were most likely livestock thieves, rustlers. You're welcome to respond.
Okay. That's cool. He's still and what is it, like 90% of Mongolian DNA, despite what his descendants was. He tore across Asia. I never said he was Mongolian. I don't believe. I said he was in Mongolia, and where Mongolia is currently is primarily his DNA. So, sure.
Okay. And then let's see. I'm trying to see if there's anything else that's like set definitely to you. Let's give this one a whirl. The Trib 1 comes in with a big 10, says force is running society right now. It's forcing a more, I wonder if he meant ruining. It's forcing a more secular and liberal society is all. Force doesn't equal conservative, it equals power. Every country trends towards progressivism. Cope harder, you are losing.
I don't think that's for me.
Okay,
he says
that's what
force
I was.
is. Yeah, I think that was for Vybe, because he's saying that force is actually ruining society and it's not building a good society. Whereas Vybe was saying that it's used as a mechanism for by the social contract. So force is ruining society. It's force born.
It's either ruining or running. I don't know how.
Is he back? Yeah, I think he's back. Country leads towards progressivism, co-part, or losing. Bob, you there?
Yeah,
I
he's
am.
here.
I'm trying to read that right now. L equals conservative. IT equals power. Yeah, I don't understand that comment.
Okay, cool. I don't
Okay, I had a hard time understanding it too. All right, here's.
I think they're basically saying that force is winning, not my social contract, right? They're saying that force actually runs everything. That's what I think they're saying.
That's what I thought too. I was like, I think that's actually for you, not for me.
Okay.
But I don't know how to respond to it either.
Well, then he follows up with another 10 and says, social contract is always existing. Force is always existing. Love the Sparta example with slaves. You do know America also had slaves, right? The social contract updated. It's fluid. Again, we're progressing. I think this is towards you, Azrael.
I mean, America still technically have slaves. There's more slaves today than there has been in any period in the entirety of history. They're just sex slaves instead of working slaves.
Anything from you, Vybe?
Yeah, I mean, I think slaves is, it's an interesting concept. When we look at slaves from the Old Testament, it was just kind of like how things were. There were people that were voluntarily slaves to families. And the Bible says, like, treat your slaves well, because they were basically employees. They're your maid, they're your housekeeper. We have those today. We have people that actually are employed to companies that they'd like to quit, but they have to make the money. So they're a slave to that company. We've got inmates. As Azrael said, we've got sex trafficking, and we've got minors, like slaves. Like, there's so many slaves, depending on how you want to determine it.
Okay. And then if you wanted to respond to this one from earlier.
Social contract creates legitimacy. Let's see. What is excessive force? Your king was sacrificed for legitimacy of the law. Life for tooth for tooth.
I think that I don't know if he's referring to the king as Jesus.
I think so, but I mean, ultimately, I mean, this is kind of what I was actually arguing about, right? So when force is used, there has to be some sort of legitimacy behind it. Otherwise, the state that's enforcing that force is not going to be welcomed if they're not doing it with some sort of legitimacy, right? And that would be the contract. And if the state is enforcing it without legitimacy, then typically you start seeing riots, you start seeing upheaval, you start seeing the society collapse, and there's all these things that happen. So yes, does force happen without a contract? Yes. When it happens without a contract, it fails.
Okay. All right. And I think that was it for you guys. I think we got through them all. All right. Are you ready to meet your panel, gentlemen? It's filled up back there. They came in fast. Here we go. All right. Everyone except for Vybe, Azrael, and myself are going to mute their mics for now. And I'm going to start off with a fun little round robin. All right. I know most of you are familiar with the kind of new change up to the panel portion of debates. But I'm going to add one other caveat. If you have serious inquiries, comments, or questions, that is most welcome. If you would like to come up and insult and banter and talk shit, I ask you to just simply pass on your turn and hold it for full gauntlet mode. Otherwise, I'd like to get through actual conversation and you know, there's a point to this portion of the panel. So Beth, you were first in line backstage. I'd like to hand it off to you. I know you got kind of mixed up in the rumble back there, but it's good. So I'll let you kick us off with your question, and be mindful, everyone, when you ask your question, and that, you know, maybe have a little follow-up discourse back and forth, but there are other people waiting in line to ask their questions too. So make the first one quick and important, get through it, and then we move on to the next. Go ahead, Beth.
Okay. Two very quick things. I'll be as fast as possible. I got to first start off. Azrael, are you an Orthodox Christian? No, are you a Protestant, or like... I'm just trying to gauge where you're at so I can kind of meet you here in the middle on this.
I would fall under Protestant, but I side closer with Orthodoxy and Catholic views.
Okay, perfect. So you pointed out a lot about to Papua New Guinea, Muslims, all of those social contracts, right? I want to go to an older and far more successful social contract, and that was conversion by the sword under Orthodoxy / Catholicism. And with that, it was the social contract that came first, with the force being what, you know, was the ultimate determinant of whether or not you live. The contract was either become Christian or, you know, be unalived. We see a lot today, just as you brought up yourself, that there's a lot of right-wing Christians who are pushing to repeal the 19th, get in the kitchen, be a stay-at-home mom, and don't believe that there's any such thing as grape in the marriage. So my question is, are they banking on the social contract, which, as Vybe pointed out, would naturally come first, or are they threatening force?
Who is they? You said a lot. You brought up 4 different points. Can you be more concise?
I gave a little mini history lesson. I pointed out that
I didn't need the history lesson. I just need your question if you're going to ask me one. What is it?
my question is, again, I'll repeat it. When you bring up a lot of the positions of right-wing Christians nowadays, especially within like the Orthodox and Catholic communities, about like repealing the 19th and stay-at-home moms and not believing in grape in the marriage and that kind of thing, is it coming down to people being expected to conform under the social construct, as Vybe points out, would naturally come first, or are they threatening to use force to push that confirmation?
I mean, in any case, it's force. So we can even look at how Christians are being subjugated to the laws of secularists right now. There is mass genocide amongst babies right now before they're even given the chance to be born. So we're subjugated to the force doctrine of secularists. If Christians did gain a hold in society, secularists would be subjugated to the force doctrine of Christians. It's whoever holds the most power in society.
Orthodoxy is up 78% compared to pre-pandemic attendance numbers. Christianity is the fastest growing and the largest religion worldwide. So how is it that they're not in power and exacting the force that you're talking about?
Because most Christians are benevolent and don't want to impose our religion on each other because of the way that our religion is set up.
Yet they want to take away the 19th Amendment and don't believe in grace
yes,
and
we want
marriage.
to take back. I mean, that really seems to be bothering you. Yes, we want to take away.
No, actually, I don't vote as a woman. I don't vote, so it's okay.
Good.
I'm fine with not having
We need
that.
more of that.
I'm just saying it's kind of hard to talk out of both sides of your mouth, and I think that Vybe is correct when he says the social construct does indeed steer the society rather than the force.
So you can say Vybe is correct. If you didn't listen to the debate, that's fine. I said that the social construct may be the steering mechanism, whereas force doctrine is the driving force. So all you're doing is parroting what I've already stated. Awesome.
No, I think you're just really looking for a weak way to twist that, sir. But that's okay.
It does feel like you constantly keep on switching this, right? I think you're very adamant that force doctrine is real, and you're standing on that. And I think everybody on this panel, maybe I'm wrong, somebody might speak up, that we all actually agree with that statement, that force doctrine is real. The strongest person can do that. However, I do believe that the force that human beings use, not animals, human beings use, has a higher power. And that is the social contract, which could be God. It could be secularists coming together and coming to an agreement on whether they think this is right or not. But I believe that all force is implemented based with some sort of justification that is higher than force. Otherwise, all men would just be beating the shit out of each other.
Sure, until it's not.
Mm-hmm.
Like in the case of Egypt, Persia, Rome, and Sparta, all had a larger subjugated class than a ruling class. Throughout all of history,
what happened?
We've had lords, feudal lords, and things like that who are leading society rather than a democratic system. It wasn't until within the past, 200-300 years that we've actually started implementing democratic systems.
Oh,
you have to understand, though, that the social contract is different than a democratic system, right? Like when the social contract is not being met,
is by definition
and the force...
what a social contract would be. It's where all individuals agree on a premise.
No. Actually, that's why there's uprisings. That's why there are riots. That's why when people feel like things are happening wrong, the people, the neighbors, and that's why I keep on going to neighbors. The neighbors start rising up and going, I don't like the force that's being put on me. You actually asked me the question, if it was me and my 5 kids in a bar and there was 20 guys there and they could kick my ass, could they not kick my ass? Yes, they have the force dominance, but it doesn't mean that it was morally correct. And the the majority outside of that bar is going to come and uprise against that eventually.
Morality is irrelevant to force doctrine. It doesn't matter.
The few already
That's where you're failing.
many in this country, but I'm pretty sure Clay's going to end up bringing that up. So I'm going to leave that one for him or Sasquatch.
All right. Thank you, Beth. Thank you. All right. Obstacles, you were next in line. I will kick it over to you if you have a question or comment to either of the gentlemen or both.
Yeah, it's the AZ. Shout out to you, Sarah. But I think it was a great conversation between both men. It stayed civilized. But I guess we're going to have to use some force right here. AZ, you made up some great points. And I want you to highlight what you just kind of said, but kind of dive a little bit deeper of what you mean when you say that majority of human history was not no democracy. It was a bunch of people who probably did have some social construct until somebody came over and mollywopped them and created a new social construct that forced the rest to follow that new imperative. So I think you were just trying to point out how ruling class or just the powerful always kind of steered the entire whole direction when it came down to social contract. Can you elaborate, or did I get that misinformed?
Yeah, you got it pretty good. I mean, social contracts, as I stated before, is an agreement between individuals where they're following a certain set of rules for the betterment of society. Throughout a majority of society, in almost every civilization throughout history, it's been a ruling class who imposes their imperative on mostly, which is typically majorities. If they don't follow status quo, they typically would have been flogged or killed throughout all of society,
right?
Or worse. Yeah. I mean, we can look at, so at the end of slavery, whenever the Western civilization ended the transatlantic slave trade, there wasn't a lot of slaves to be sold because they couldn't sell them anymore. There was one civilization that massacred these people in such abundant numbers that they would fill pools with their blood, and they would float boats in it. So it's force rules the end of the day. It doesn't matter about your social contract, it's a convenience for people today to actually think they have a voice when they don't.
There we go.
So
that's what I think the disconnect from a lot of what you're saying is. Most people are conditioned in this current environment to believe like, hey, look, I'm the majority. We rule the country. They really do believe that. And so at the end of the day, they come from that, and they're not looking at the world that you're talking about. They're ignoring the 5,000, 10,000, let's say 100,000. A guy even just said recently, I don't know if it was you, Vybe, but tribes just came together and they were peaceful from the beginning. Like, really? Like, really, my guy? Like, no, ask the women. If that be the case, all the women should have had their rights from day one. We were all just great tribes from the beginning. And it's all been fake. Nah, force was the leading factor. There was no resources. But since you got Uber Eats, you can say that now. So I agree. Shout out to you, Easy.
Fair enough. Thank you, Obstacles. Effigy, I will hand it over to you, sir.
Yeah, the reason you don't get into this morally is that they've been conflating three different things. Well, Azrael's been conflating three different things the whole different time we've been doing this. Andrew Wilson's force doctrine, actual force doctrine, and the principle of might makes right, which are three completely different things. Force doctrine, as elucidated by this idea that projected force is maintaining your rights, that absolutely is based on mutual agreement, which is a much better term than saying social contract, social construct. It's all about mutual agreement, the mutual agreement of parties. You cannot project force in any way without a mutual agreement, whether it's making a gang or making an army or making a police force. They have to mutually agree to be a part of something. They have to mutually agree to the power structure. Mutual agreement is the heart of everything. The reason you guys keep going to these individualistic examples is because you keep wanting to go to might makes right, which we have always said that's all you guys force doctrine people are. Your might makes right, dressed up like a pig. My question is very, very simple, and it goes to the heart of this whole fucking thing. Does the act of two people making a binding promise create a social reality that force can destroy, but it can never replicate?
Force in itself, or the individuals who create force?
Can force replicate the same thing as two people making a binding promise? Does it make the same social reality? Can it ever make the exact same social reality of people promising to do something versus being forced to do something.
I mean, it's not going to make the same reality, but that doesn't really contend with the argument in itself.
That's why social contract is more superior.
It doesn't contend with the argument in itself.
It totally does.
It doesn't. And I can highlight how. So you're saying that two individuals can have an agreement and utilize force, but if individuals have more force than those two individuals utilizing agreement, it doesn't actually make it right. And I never said might makes right. I actually specifically said might does not make right. Might just makes.
I mean, you could say that, but then you use examples that are completely might makes right. Every time you use an individualistic example of like, well, there were more of them than you, and their force was more.
I never said that made it. I never.
It's very rare that Effigy and I actually agree, but I'm backing up Effigy on this in the whole fact that there are tons of times where we agree with no law with a neighbor. Yes, I will throw away the branches from my tree in the garbage with no enforcement whatsoever. It's a verbal contract that is not enforced by might, power, might makes right, force doctrine, or even like Plato's Republic, right? It's just a contract that has no enforcement at all that we both adhere to. And we do this all the time as human beings. We do this all the time.
There's plenty of enforcement. It's just there are like the unwritten rules of it, right? Like the base of it. Even when there was kingship in the land, if the king treated the peasants bad enough, they could just start killing everyone. You know, that's always part of it. You can abandon the contract and go back to the might makes right world. The entirety of human history has been getting away from the might makes right world. You know, people bring up Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan was chosen by a panel to be Genghis Khan, you know? So, and one last thing I would say is that because this relies on projected force, the entire force, whatever you want to call it, it requires projected force. The only thing that wields projected force is authority. Where does authority come from? Because it doesn't come from force.
I got the power.
And with that, I will
right.
pass it to the next.
So glad to be on your side for one time.
I will hand it over to Clay. Clay, go ahead.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Vybe. Thank you, Azrael, for doing this debate. It's certainly something that it's a long time coming for sure. Vybe, you did a really awesome job. I got to give you a lot of props. It's one of the reasons why I don't really try to challenge debates, because I'm a little bit impatient on things sometimes, and you did a very good job of taking your time with it and pointing out many things. Azrael, I don't agree with you, but I do like your patience, your ability to debate.
My ability to get cut off and continue to let them cut me off and never actually make a full argument. Yes, I did very well in being patient and letting him ramble.
Quit whining. Shit.
I gave you a compliment. I was hoping you'd just take it as a compliment. That was a gift. That was not me being forced to give you anything. It was a gift willingly, just so you know. So I want to touch on legitimacy. And I'm very thankful that Vybe got what I was saying in my super chat. The legitimacy of the law is based upon that someone is giving a balance. That's justice. There's a scale. Okay, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. So the sacrifice of your very king is based upon an agreement that is made. Now, that's just one thing I want to touch on. There's so many places that I could go with this, but I want to point out that when you say might makes, that is not at all force doctrine according to the way that you are putting it out, or Andrew, or any of the ortho bros.
Yep,
that is legitimacy. You are trying to create legitimacy out of force. Force does not have legitimacy without authority, sir. That is why there is a king and there is a kingdom. You cannot have a kingdom without a king, and you cannot have a king without a kingdom. The subjects matter. The subjects of your nation matter. And guess what? God's not here having this discussion with us. We're having the discussion. The social contract is the best way, in my humble opinion, to come to an agreement. This is my view of it. How do you respond?
There was no question in that statement. You got to actually ask a question.
Do you agree with my statement? And if not, why not?
I don't agree with anything you define my statement. I never said that force creates legitimacy. I said force is just force. Force is just a mechanism. Yes, as I've stated before, you guys are really good at straw man in my argument that the societies with constructs or societal contracts utilize force as a mechanism. However, the force as a mechanism is the driving force. It's not the contract. The force can exist without a contract. A contract cannot exist without force.
Okay, so just to clarify, the force is what's making people sign documents and have agreements, or is it the other way around? Am I bartering with you to create a fair price, your barley for my wheat, or is it because you want my wheat and you're forcing me to take your barley?
So in the case of feudal lords and serfs and kings and rulers, they imposed taxes. They just took it. There's no contract. They took whatever they want. They taxed at such high rates that individuals were dying from hunger. It's force that rules the day. It's force, and at the end, that is going to give authority to anyone. You can look at the massive amount of slaves in Egypt, Persia, what else? Rome and Sparta, all civilizations that had a large subjugated class. It wasn't a social contract. There was nothing they could do. They were subjugated upon by force.
Yeah, and I would agree with that 100%.
Hey, this is supposed to be a one-on-one, bro. Your time's coming up. You just wait. A little patience. You've chimed in 3 times already.
The founders called it a necessary evil. You're just rebranding what Rousseau and Locke and Hobbes already determined. It's the necessary evil that our founders recognized in the great philosophers before you and Andrew Wilson.
Thank you for calling me a great philosopher. I'm not Andrew Wilson. I know you guys got a hard on for him and can't keep him out your mouth.
A great philosopher, sir.
You said great philosophers before me. So,
but I'll pass it on. This is good.
Go.
Works better if you're not muted.
Sorry, my son's calling. Let's see. Okay, Sasquatch, you are next. Please go ahead.
All right. So there's been a lot of talk about force and application and doctrines and constructs and contracts and sociology and social experimentation and all of this. What you're really trying to discuss is where the force is, where the power is, the force that is being generated and where it's being applied. And the social contract is the part of all this that restricts the force that is used against the subjugated. As the people, we are in a position to vote for what applications we are willing to accept. We have a judicial system that's supposed to mitigate the application of power overreach from the government. We've got electoral representatives that are in power to basically represent the statement of force that we're going to accept. At what point in time in all of this does it not appear to be might makes right? Because force is really the only applicable part of the equation. The social contract is a mitigating factor. So doesn't it ultimately come down to force?
Yeah, see, I keep on coming down to this, that we can follow the logic train very easily, that the strongest man is always going to win. The strongest group of people are always going to win. They always are going to. Once again, this is where I first, like when I first heard Andrew Wilson's thing, like, hey, men granted women's rights because we did. My question always is, though, even though we could cage all women, My question always comes back to, why don't we? So why don't we do these things? If might equals right, and we've seen this, and Azrael has pointed out many different scenarios where might did equal right, but overall in the whole world, we do see might actually prevailing, but the majority of the world, there's something else that's stopping the force from actually happening. We are better than that, right? We step up as humans and we go, just because I have the capability of force, which is kind of ironic right now with us in Iran, but even though we have the capability of force, why don't we, right? And that's where I keep on having the question, right? If we have the ability to be the strongest male, the strongest country, why don't we always just take over everything?
Because of that social contract we discussed. It is the mitigating factor of the application of force.
And that's why I say that the social contract actually trumps force doctrine. I agree that it exists. I agree that it's real. I agree that it's necessary. I don't think it's a fantasy. I do understand that the strongest male can beat up the weaker male, right? These are all things that are real. But there's something bigger.
Yeah, so all you guys have kind of agreed upon, as long as the people in charge or people with force are not imposing their will in a certain time, people can do what they want because you agree upon it. However, it's still the fact that the force is allowing it. It still comes down to force at the end, and that's the point you guys are missing. You guys are conflating the idea of people allowing force or allowing people to do what they want without forcing them to do what they want with the fact that they're being allowed to do it. It's just it's redundant.
Okay. All right. And I do apologize. My son, he went up to Pop Pops for spring break, and I just dropped him off a few hours ago, and he already was having a moment. So thank you for your patience with that. Chuck, I will hand it over to you, sir. Your question or comment?
Okay, I hope y'all can hear me.
Yep.
This is for either one of the gentlemen. There's 10 of us up here. We're in a commune. Brick is in charge of the wheat production. Sasquatch got goats. I got chickens, and Sarah's in charge of the bathhouse. And Brick has a lousy harvest. And Brick says, well, I'm tired of eating goat. I'm going to go get a chicken. Brick runs over and steals a chicken from Chuck. Well, then Beth sees Brick steal the chicken and says, he's getting a chicken for free, so I'm going to go get a chicken. So does not the social construct bring about the force doctrine? Because all of a sudden we say, hey, we need somebody in charge, and pardon the terminology, to police what's going on. We're no longer allow these people to steal chickens. And this is for either Vybe or Azrael.
Yeah, so
I think this is pretty easy, right?
But
Sorry, Azrael, go ahead.
Clay, Balderson, and Obstacles and I all agreed that you guys are just going to make the chicken or raise the chickens for us. You're going to grow the produce for us. You're going to do all this. If you don't, we're going to beat your ass. Then simple as that.
You're twisting my question. You're twisting my question.
Yeah, personally, I think that in this particular scenario, if we're talking like 5 people, then normally it's going to be shame, right? Like if you're like hanging out, I'm raising chickens, you're raising chickens, you steal some of my chickens, the other 4 people are going to be like, shame on you, right? It's going to be shame. Now, maybe the one guy's really big, and then he's going to use his force doctrine to come over there and beat you and go, I don't care, I can steal your chickens. Right. And the rest of the society is going to go, well, no, that's not quite right.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that the construct of the society says, hey, we don't like you stealing so-and-so's chickens. Therefore, we're going to appoint someone to enforce doctrine.
No, but I think I actually did hit what you were saying, right? So I'm trying to keep it really.
No.
What you're saying
They
is
got
that
him again.
now we've grown beyond 5 people. We've got 100 people, right?
Is he freezing? Or
Is it me or is it Vybe?
I think
Yeah,
it's
he's
Vybe.
freezing.
It's fine.
That hand, the hand of
Come on,
God.
it's
I
always
see
you,
it
Chuck.
now. Shit, I'm running.
Just fold. You know you've lost
There
now.
he is. There he is. There he is.
I'm back on. I'm back on. Okay. Sorry.
You need to steal some
my
Wi-Fi.
point being, the reason I put it down to 5 people, right, is what you're saying, Chuck, is okay. Now, if we get beyond 5 people, we go to 100 people and then 1,000 people. Now we have to go, okay, we've got a bigger construct. And now we have to put somebody, we have to appoint somebody on top of that. But in reality, when we have 1,000 people, 1,000,000 people, a freaking country, it all comes down to the same thing. Like we have a society of 5 people that were like all living together. One person stole the chicken, and now we just got so big. It's the same point. So I don't think I didn't answer your question. I think I answered it very well in the sense that you have to multiply it, and eventually somebody has to have a role, right? But it originally stemmed from tribes, and tribes said, hey, I'm growing chickens, you're growing chickens. I might share some eggs with you, but only if I want to. But you can't steal them. And then Azrael says, well, if I'm bigger,
if you take it on 10, if you take it on just 10 people, just like the panel, 10 people, eventually somebody is going to be appointed to enforce what the social construct wants. Is that not forced doctrine?
No, I do not think if it was a group of 10 people. I think 10 people can pretty much get along without a leader.
I agree with
There'll
always
be somebody that probably steps up and people listen to just because of the natural behavior of people. But it doesn't mean that they're the leader. It just means that people are just submitting. But there is a point where you grow so big where all of a sudden you have to start delegating tasks. And the delegating of tasks, like a president or the director of a police department locally, just becomes a necessity out of growth.
I get what you're saying.
Not because people are like, we need a policeman and you're the policeman. It's a necessity out of delegation and growth.
Well, whether it's 10 or 100, the same concept applies.
Well, no, the concept applies to 5 people, right? And then once it grows beyond 5 people, when we start thinking about plumbing and we start thinking about all these other things and like infrastructure and fire safety, now we have to actually start appointing people. But this is not forced doctrine. This is like just going, hey, there's roles, and there's roles in societies when societies grow.
I still don't really understand what Chuck's saying, but in any case, Vybe's from what I can tell in our debate so far, his answer would be that the society would be the society and the societal contract that they hold is the one that's governing that forced doctrine body. So it's the society that controls it, but irrevocably it's the force of those individuals that controls it. And if those individuals decide to utilize their force to overthrow said society, then society will be overthrown. So I completely understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's 100%.
It does come down to force doctrine. So
yeah, I mean, you're kind of 100% correct there, right? So let's say society grows to that point where people get roles, and the people in the top roles start controlling the military, and the military have dominance over. So let's say let's just make up numbers, 10 really strong guys. They have nuclear weapons, they have everything, and 100 people. And they have all the might. They have all the power, so they can destroy their own society. So they say, I want you to do everything us 10 say, even though the 100 of them, their subjects, disagree. What we've seen in civilization over and over is that, yes, the ones with the 10 nukes and all the power tend to win for a while, but then we start having riots, then we start having upheavals, we start having people defecting from that. We get rebellion, and eventually those 100 people, which are more powerful than the 10 that have all the power, win. over and
not-
over. We've seen this in history.
not
Right?
always
This
more
is a history
powerful.
lesson that we've seen.
They're not always more powerful. And you're just saying society. At this point, you're just saying society.
No, they're not always more
Egypt,
powerful.
Persia,
right?
Rome, and Sparta all existed for like 10 times. Well, at least what 4
But
or
they
5
don't
times
anymore, do they?
4 or 5 times longer than America has. I mean,
Okay, maybe we'll crash, but they don't exist anymore. They
at the end
always
of the
end up
day,
getting
you're
overthrown by
appealing
the
to
people
America-
that have less might.
You're appealing to American history where individuals in themselves have only existed for like 250 years when I appealed to a Spartan society that existed for 1,000 years. And then you're saying, well, they fell. So, I mean, I don't know what further to argue with that just because I don't find it valuable to argue against some simple topics. You're like, well, they fell. Well, we're going to fall. Well, I think we'll fall far before 1,000 years. So if their society lasts longer than ours, then they're right. They did it correct.
Isn't if I could just throw this in there and then I'll hand it over to Ben, but isn't calling it a force doctrine in and of itself, calling it a force construct, like it's in the
Yes.
word that it's a construct.
Yes. Yes.
A doctrine. I looked up the definition of doctrine, and it kind of made me tickle pink a little bit because hold on, it's wait, hold on, let me pull it up one more time. I moved it over.
Hey, Sarah, I know while you're looking that up, I hate to be really rude, but the reason you keep on seeing my kids show up on here is because they really want to go to Yogurtland, right?
Get those
So I
kids
gotta
to
take a-
Yogurtland. Get out of here.
Tell them you
Get
got
out of here.
Yogurtland at home.
How dare you, sir?
And by the way, Azrael, I mean, if I can just do a quick goodbye, like seriously, I really do respect you. I think you're a great guy. I've watched your debates. I think you're very good faith. No hate here. Love that you jumped up on this panel. If you guys are in the gauntlet when I come back, I'll jump back in. But yeah, I have to say goodbye. But once again,
Real quick before you
hit
go,
that
I knew
subscribe
this-
button
We
to
love
both of
you,
you guys.
Vibes.
Hit
Hold
the
on,
subscribe button to both of you guys. And by the way, I only have 151 subscribers. So anybody on this channel that's not watching right now, freaking go to my channel and freaking subscribe. I need to get into that monetization mode so I can get a Shure microphone and not this crappy little thing I got right here. I love you. And Balderson, I was actually trying to stay on here to hear your response. I apologize that I'm not here to hear that, but I got to go.
Well done tonight, Vibe.
All right, you have a
Thank
good
you,
one.
guys.
I knew it was going to be a good faith debate when I was debating you, so that's why I agreed to it. You have a good one, man.
Yeah.
Can you drop his link backstage? I can't find it.
There are more important things in the world than force doctrine.
Yeah,
it
but
was
Clay,
on-
you see how the kids were jumping on him? That's forced doctrine. The kids
That's-
jumped on him, made him go to the yoga shop. Shout out to the
Anyone
Clay.
who's experienced vagina understands there are things more important than force doctrine.
Pussy has all the power.
I'll go ahead and hand it over to Mr. Balderson. You are the last one, and then we will be moving over to the gauntlet here momentarily. But just a heads up that that's coming, so keep your notifications on for that one. Go ahead, Ben.
From my point of view, force only comes with a breakdown of society. Whether it's to punish somebody that has veered from the contract we've made, or else it's even going to war with somebody else. You're breaking apart a society. You're not actually building anything. The building only comes with the mutual agreement between each other. Whether it's a great agreement or not, that's the only time that you build a society. So I'd like to know what society was actually ever built off of force.
Sparta.
Sparta is
go.
a mutual agreement.
Nope, they had a 1-to-7 ratio of a subjugated class to a ruling class. You can also look at Persia, which subjugated, Rome, which subjugated people, and Egypt, which had a huge slave population.
Yeah, and slaves usually agree to stay slaves. When they don't, they uprise.
Yeah,
And
it was their
they
their
break-
agreement.
they
They were
break
like, I
apart
want to be a
contract.
slave. That's a great argument, bro. I don't know why I thought of that. I should have thought
Well,
of that.
it's still a construct. Like they have this belief of something that this is where they belong, right? Or that there is no other option. Compliance. Why does everybody pay taxes? Here in
because we don't
America.
feel like we don't feel like throwing a tea party yet because everyone has weak spines and they're comfortable sitting on their phone in their air conditioned houses, driving their cars. That doesn't mean
I feel targeted.
that doesn't mean when it comes down to the end of society, when rubber meets the road, that force doctrine isn't going to be the main driving mechanism.
According to the law,
It's going to be the main driving mechanism that breaks apart the societal pieces. It doesn't build a society in and of itself.
The society needs to be broken
So you
apart.
can't call it
It's corrupted from
superior.
the
It's a
inside.
destructive force. Period. It's not a constructive force. It's a destructive force. And then a new society needs to be constructed.
So, and
buttons on ice cream.
I do have an interesting situation where I live in Thailand right now. For the last 4 years, the military had seized the government power and ruled the country. It's not a part of the doctrine. They just had the power to do it. And even when they don't have it, it tends to be a soft power in the background, letting all the political parties know that we can take it. So even though the people came together for the most part and voted to change the construct and get another, political party in, the military just seized power and took it and held it for about 5 years. The society went on. People went to school. People went to work. People continued to educate. Tourists continued to come in the country, but they just seized the power. Eventually, they gave it back, but it's always the underlying factor that each political party knows that they can seize it and take it. They are the force that drives the country.
And what do they use to take it? Do they use social contracts to take it?
No, they had guns. They
No,
had
no,
guns.
they
use guns.
Listen,
They use tanks,
At
Humvees, stuff
what
like
point
that.
in history have you ever seen an army of one?
Hold on. This is an interesting example, though. If I remember right, Thailand has had the most overturned.
So
Thailand has had the most overturned government in history, if I remember right.
Was that government or military?
Yeah,
one person,
between two
or was
different
it
political groups.
Was it multiple people or was it one person?
That's irrelevant.
What's the difference?
So
What's the difference?
as I
Relevant?
said, yeah,
It's just
yeah.
irrelevant because you said so. Okay.
It was
How
multiple
many
guns,
people does it take to build an army?
I mean, irrelevant. I mean, you're
No.
just stating the fact that people have to agree to go to war.
Yes, people have
Neither
to
one of you guys
into one
answered my question.
form and fashion. Like I don't like you're a Marine. You know that you can't go in alone, right?
Are we going to open panel now? I thought we were answering Balderson's question.
It just kind of maneuvered on its own. I'll go ahead. The Gauntlet, I officially have started it over on that channel. If you're watching over on the Raging Tomato, don't worry. The mods will drop the link over to the Gauntlet into the chat. Thank you so much, Guns, and whoever else is over there. And then also you can catch the raid over to the Gauntlet as well when we close it out. Otherwise, the Raging Tomato side will be shutting down as of now. So we'll see you on the other side for the full open panel. All right.